The mate bond was severed on the night of the full moon ritual. It didn't fade away silently. Instead, he severed it with a single stroke of his blade in front of more than 300 wolves. That night, every member of the Grey Rock Pack gathered around the altar. Moonlight cascaded like a silver waterfall across the massive stone floor as the elders chanted ancient vows. Wearing the gray cloak my mother had left me, I stood at the very edge of the crowd, my palms sweaty because I knew Carson was to formally hold his mate. Binding ceremony today. According to wolf tradition, all unmated alphas must choose a mate from among the awakened she. Wolves on the night of the full moon in their 20th year and publicly complete the bonding ritual before the altar. I had thought he would choose me. After all, we grew up together. He was the boy who stood in front of me when I was bullied by other pups, the teenager who soothed me with his body heat when I first lost control and shifted. The silvery mark on his wrist, exactly like mine, had bound us together for 2 whole years, and everyone took it for granted that we were meant to be. Even I had come to believe it. So when he stepped onto the altar, my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I thought he would reach out to me, but he didn't. He stood on the highest stone step, his golden gaze sweeping across the entire pack, then settling on Ella, 3 paces away from me. Then his voice was as calm as if he were announcing today's prey allocation. I, Carson Silvermoon, heir to the Grey Rock Pack, hereby solemnly declare, I will reject my destiny's mark and choose Ella as my mate. For the pack needs a powerful alpha mate, not a worthless failure who can't even control her own form. The crowd fell deathly silent. The next second, everyone's gaze pierced me like nails. I could even hear stifled snickers. In that moment, my legs went weak and my mind went blank. But what I'll never forget is the image of him stepping down from the altar and walking toward me, step by step holding that silver ritual knife in his hand, its blade reflecting the cold moonlight. He stood before me, looking down at me. There was not a trace of hesitation in his eyes, only resolve. He said, "Hold out your arm." My voice was no longer my own, dry as if clogged with grit. "Are you going to cut out the mark right here at the altar? Since I do not acknowledge this bond of companionship, this mark has no right to exist." His tone was as matter of fact as if he were treating a worn-out wound. I only wished to make it disappear completely. My mind screamed at me to run, to scream, to cry out, and beg him not to do this. But my body trembled slightly as I raised my left arm, exposing the silvery, white totem. He positioned the tip of the knife against the first stroke of the mark and slashed down with force. Pain. Not the pain of skin being cut, but the agony of my soul being torn in two while I was still alive. That force surged through my body with my blood. My heart felt as if it had been clenched tightly by a hand, then thrown to the ground. I clenched my teeth, refusing to let out a sound. 3 cuts, 4 cuts, 5 cuts. He carved into the inside of my forearm, stroke by stroke. Each cut carried the backlash of the wolf god's mark. Silvery light shattered into starlight from the wounds, then faded. Blood dripped onto the ground, mingling with the moonlight, creating a harrowing sight. And I didn't shed a single tear throughout the entire ordeal. It wasn't that it didn't hurt. It was that after reaching the peak of agony, my body instinctively activated some sort of self-preservation mechanism. My eyes grew abnormally dry, yet my pupils contracted. A strange, icy consciousness slowly awoke from the depths of my marrow, like a dormant venomous snake finally roused by a disturbance. The moment the mark was completely erased, I heard a soft crack from the bones in my wrist. Then the mark vanished, replaced by a thin black line, like the remnant of some sealing spell. I looked down at the line, and a memory of the pendant's faint warmth against my chest suddenly flashed through my mind. No one noticed that black line. Everyone was too busy watching Ella stride proudly up to the altar, watching Carson clasp her wrist, watching two new marks slowly emerge in the moonlight. And I, abandoned in the shadows beneath the altar, my arm still bleeding, clutched that pendant in my palm. I heard my heart beat slow and steady, beat by beat, like a war drum in rehearsal. A voice exploded in my mind, as clear as if someone were speaking directly into my ear. The first layer of the seal has been broken, my daughter. Let those who scorned you, humiliated you, and hurt you take a good look. The rage in your blood was never meant for courtship, but for slaughter. On the night the mark was completely erased, I sat alone on a cliff at the edge of the wolf pack's territory. The wound on my arm had already scabbed over, but that thin black line seemed to come alive, wriggling faintly beneath my skin. Bathed in moonlight, it glowed with a faint purplish sheen, as if some ancient seal were slowly dissolving. I stared at that line, my mind replaying everything that had happened at the altar over and over. The mockery in 300 pairs of eyes, Carson's icy gaze, Ella's proud, upturned head, and the image of me kneeling on the ground, watching my blood stain the earth drop by drop. In that moment, I didn't want to cry. I just wanted to figure out one thing. Why am I so weak? From childhood onward, I've always been at the very bottom of the gray rock pack. While other pups could control their shape-shifting by 3 months old, I was still losing control on full moon nights at 6 years old. Cowering in the grass, trembling, my howl sounding like that of a wounded wildcat. While other she-wolves could hunt on their own by the age of 12, I was still assigned to gather firewood at 15, because I couldn't even catch a rabbit. I'd be gasping for breath halfway through the chase, my limbs going limp as if every ounce of strength had been sucked out of me. The elders had examined me several times, all saying my bloodline was impure and my talents ordinary. Some even whispered behind my back that I was an abandoned mongrel. Only my foster mother, Martha, the old she-wolf, who had fled the north, never said much. Every night, she would bring me a bowl of steaming herbal tea, retie my obsidian pendant, and whisper, "Liana, some flowers have roots that run deep, so they bloom slowly." I always thought those were just words of comfort, until this very moment, as I sat on the cliff's edge, staring at the thin black lines on my arm. Fragments of memories that weren't my own suddenly flooded my mind. The frozen mountains of the north, thousands of black wolves racing across the snow, a man standing atop the highest peak, cloaked in black, his long silver hair billowing in the wind, his eyes a deep purple, like 2 burning amethysts. He turned around, his face as sharp and cold as if carved by a knife. His lips parted slightly, and his voice, though low, echoed through the entire valley. "My daughter, one day you will need this power." My heart gave a sudden jolt, and the pendant on my chest grew fiercely hot, so hot that I could feel the burning pain even through my clothes. I yanked open my collar and pulled out the pendant. In the moonlight, cracks began to appear on the obsidian surface, as if something were about to break free from within. Terrified, I tried to throw it away, but my hand felt glued to it. I couldn't let go no matter what. Then, I heard a voice. It didn't come from outside. It exploded directly inside my head. It was a woman's voice, weak and aged, yet carrying an irresistible air of authority. "You have finally met the conditions for unlocking it, young prince." My whole body went rigid as I scanned the area. There was no one else on the cliff but me. Yet the voice continued, "Don't look for me. I'm inside the pendant. I am a remnant of your mother's soul, tasked with awakening you once you turn 18 and have endured a soul-searing trauma. Do you know why you've been so weak since childhood? It's not that your power vanished. It was sealed away by your father himself." My throat tightened. My father, who is he? Rain Shadowfang, the Alpha King of the Northern Wolf Clan, a forbidden being who has remained undefeated for 30 years. On the day you were born, the entire North trembled, for the seer knelt before his throne and declared, "Your daughter will possess twice your power. She will be the key to a new era. But the second half of the prophecy was, this power will be coveted by the darkness. If it does not awaken at the right time, she will become a sacrifice fought over by all races. I could hear my own heartbeat, growing louder and louder. So your father made a decision that defied all alpha dignity. He completely sealed away your power and sent you to the Grey Rock Pack, the most remote, weakest, and utterly insignificant border tribe, unworthy of any faction's attention, to be raised by the most ordinary of she-wolves. He erased all your memories of the North, leaving only a spell within the pendant, one that would cause the first crack in the seal only when you endured an emotional blow severe enough to tear your soul apart. And today, being rejected by your mate and having your mark severed in public at the altar, the intensity of that pain was just right. My hands began to tremble. So, Carson rejected me, not because I'm too weak, but because fate requires you to shed your first true drop of blood. Liana, your so-called mate, he has no idea who he's abandoning. You think he made a choice today, choosing the stronger one over you. But what he doesn't know is you are the one who is truly powerful. He isn't even worthy of being the dust on the stepping stones of your future. I looked down at the thin black line on my arm. It had now doubled in width and was beginning to spread outward like tree roots. With every inch it extended, I could feel a strange power growing within me, like a frozen river beginning to thaw. Cold blood-tinged energy spread through my veins to every limb and bone. I slowly stood up. The wind blew up from the base of the cliff, whipping my hair. I tried clenching my fist. My knuckles cracked with a sharp snap. Then I felt a clarity unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I could hear the sound of a mouse burrowing in the bushes, 500 meters away, smell the dampness of moss by a stream 10 miles off. My pupils contracted automatically in the moonlight, and my vision became as sharp as an eagle's. That power circled within me, then sank into my dantian, like a beast, just awakened, curling up and waiting for my command. I took a deep breath, then exhaled. White mist condensed in the night sky, lingering without dispersing. I looked down at the pendant. It had shattered into 2 pieces, and the lingering spirit within had vanished after uttering its final words. Young prince, you have 3 months before the shadow guard sent by your father finds you. After 3 months, the snow wolves of the northern frontier will sweep through this remote forest to take you back. But if you are not strong enough, returning will merely make you another pawn in your father's hands. So stand up, go fight, go plunder, and prove that the name Shadowfang in your blood is not just a legend used to scare your enemies. One more thing, that pain you still feel after your mark was severed is not a sign of weakness, but a remnant of love lingering in your heart. That thread of love, you'd best cut it clean away with your own hands, just as you did with the mark. As he finished speaking, the pendant crumbled completely into dust, spilling through my fingers. Standing on the cliff's edge, I felt for the first time the power that had slumbered within me for 18 years slowly opening its eyes. Deep within my eyes, at the edges of my once gray-blue pupils, a faint purple glow began to shimmer. That night, from the northwest corner of the Grey Rock Pack, a young wolf's piercing howl rang out. But it wasn't me. It was 3 patrolling male wolves who had spotted me on the cliff. They charged over, intending to mock me, to say, "A discarded failure dares to stand here in the wind." But then they saw my eyes. In the moonlight, those eyes shimmered with a purple glow. The alpha among them recoiled 3 steps on the spot, for he had seen eyes like those only once before, many years ago, on the night he survived as a deserter from the battlefields of the north, when he had witnessed a man with long silver hair and purple eyes single-handedly slaughter an entire invading wolf pack. He said they were called shadow eyes, a bloodline trait unique to the alpha royal family of the north. And now, those eyes appeared on the worthless weakling he bullied every day. He scrambled away, rolling and crawling. I stood where I was, catching a faint sweet-sour scent in the air, the smell of fear. It suddenly dawned on me that in my 18 years of life, This was the first time I'd ever smelled the scent of someone afraid of me. That feeling was far more exquisite than I'd ever imagined. After that night, the atmosphere in the Grey Rock Pack changed. Not for the better, but for the worse. Once those 3 patrol wolves returned to camp, rumors about me spread like wildfire. First, they said Liana, the outcast left behind at the altar, had gone mad standing on the cliff all night and refusing to come back. Then they said her eyes had turned purple, and then it turned into that she might be possessed by an evil spirit. Rumors spread through a wolf pack faster than wildfire, and with every retelling, they grew 3 times more exaggerated. By the morning of the 3rd day, as I drank water by the stream, 2 young wolves were already whispering behind my back, claiming I'd been cursed by some wandering dark wolf, that my bloodline was tainted, and that I'd even summoned something on the cliff that night, which was why the patrol wolves had run for their lives. I didn't turn around. I looked down at my reflection in the stream. Gray blue eyes, dry, tangled hair, gaunt cheeks. I certainly didn't look like much of a threat, but I knew that what lay beneath the surface had already changed. That afternoon, Carson's younger brother, Ryan, cut me off at the training grounds. Ryan was 3 years younger than Carson, and was known throughout the Grey Rock Pack as a troublemaker. Relying on the fact that his older brother was the future alpha, he often bullied the weak. He stood in front of me with his hands on his hips, accompanied by 3 henchmen, his chin held high so everyone could see him. "Oh, here comes the loser. My brother didn't want. I hear you've been pulling some weird tricks lately, scaring the crap out of a few patrols. Did you find some kind of weird talisman? Or have you really lost your mind?" I didn't say a word. I just tried to walk around him. He shoved me, and I stumbled back a couple of steps, my back slamming into a tree trunk. A dozen pairs of eyes gathered around us. Some were laughing, some were frowning, but not a single one stepped forward. I brushed the dust off my shoulders, still saying nothing. It wasn't that I was afraid of him. It was because the power that had just awakened within me was warning me. You can't act yet. Only 1 layer of the seal has been broken. Your body hasn't adapted to this power yet, and using it rashly will cause even greater chaos. Besides, the lingering spirit inside the pendant made it clear, I have 3 months. This means the people from the north will come looking for me within 3 months. Until then, I can't reveal too much. So, I held back. Seeing that I wouldn't fight back, Ryan grew even more emboldened. He leaned in close, lowered his voice, and deliberately adopted a taunting tone. "You know what? My brother said that when your mark broke, your blood stank. He said, 'It's no wonder you're a worthless piece of trash. Even your blood reeks of a mongrel.'" My fingernails dug into the palms of my hands. He was provoking me, poking at my deepest wound, but I clenched my teeth, sidestepped him, and walked away without looking back. Laughter echoed behind me, along with Ryan's booming voice. "See, he's just a wimp. What purple eyes, he must have been seeing things in the dark." I walked all the way back to my little cabin, shut the door, leaned against it, and slowly raised my hand, staring at the 4 bloody indentations my fingernails had left in my palm. Drops of blood seeped out, not the usual bright red but tinged with a faint dark purple. I stared at that purple hue, and the power within me seemed to be stirred, beginning to surge. My fingers trembled involuntarily. The temperature at my fingertips was much lower than that of a normal person. Cold as well water in winter. I pressed my hand against the wooden door, and a faint sizzling sound came from beneath my fingertips. I pulled my hand away to look. 5 shallow scorch marks remained on the door. I sucked in a sharp breath. This wasn't ordinary Wolf Clan power. The core of the Shadowfang clan's inherited power is devouring. Not fire, not ice, but a shadow energy capable of eroding, disintegrating, and devouring everything. Throughout the history of the Northern Wolf Clan, this power has always been classified as taboo because it is so dangerous. It is said that the last wolf of the previous generation who possessed this power went berserk and single-handedly devoured an entire tribe. And now, I am awakening this power. I sat in the log cabin all afternoon, trying to calm that power down. At dusk, Martha returned. My foster mother, that gray-haired, slightly hunched old she-wolf, pushed open the door carrying a bowl of hot soup. Seeing me huddled in the corner, she asked nothing, merely set the soup before me, then sat down and watched me in silence. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "You know everything now." I didn't speak. I just nodded. Martha sighed, reached out her rough hand, and stroked my head. "The first time I saw you, you were this small, wrapped in a black cloak, with that pendant hanging around your neck. The person who brought you here said this child would one day leave this place and go far away. I didn't ask why, because I knew that anyone who could be sent out from that place must be extraordinary." I looked up at her. "Martha, do you know who my father is?" Martha's eyes flickered for a moment, and finally she gave a bitter laugh. "I know a little. Not much, but enough to make me realize you don't belong here. Liana, whether it's Carson or the entire Grey Rock Pack, to them you were just a passing presence from the very beginning. It wasn't that they abandoned you, it's that they could never have kept you." Hausita. Those words felt like a needle, gently piercing the softest part of my heart. For the first time, I realized that Carson's abandonment might not be a failure, but an inevitability, just as an eagle cannot stay in a henhouse forever, just as a whale in the deep sea cannot spend its entire life swimming in a pond. He rejected me not because I wasn't good enough for him, but because fate was forcing me, in the cruelest way possible, to leave this place that didn't belong to me. Even so, the pain was real. 18 years of feelings, wiped out by a single phrase, "You're too weak." How could that not hurt? Just then, a commotion suddenly erupted outside. A horn sounded urgent and shrill. It was the signal of an enemy attack. I jumped to my feet, flung open the window, and saw thick smoke billowing from the distant forest. The air thick with the stench of blood and the sound of screams. Martha's face went pale. "It's the stray wolf pack from the border. They're here to raid us again." The Grey Rock Pack was a small tribe to begin with, not particularly strong in battle, and they suffered heavy losses every time the wandering wolf packs raided them. The last time they came, they took a third of the pack's food supplies and 4 young she-wolves. The elders didn't even dare to resist. Now they were back, and judging by the noise, their numbers were even greater than before. Martha grabbed my hand. "Hide. Don't go out." But I didn't move. I stood there, listening to the commotion outside, feeling the shadow power within me begin to stir with excitement. Like a beast that had been caged for too long and was starving, catching the scent of prey. Deep within my pupils, a purple glow emerged once more. This time, it was brighter and deeper than before. I turned to look at Martha, my voice so calm it felt foreign even to me. "Martha, if I told you I could protect this place, would you believe me?" Martha stared at me blankly, saying nothing. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. In that moment, the night wind howled into the corridor, and I bumped head on into Carson, who was organizing the defenses. He held a weapon in his hand. A flash of surprise crossed his golden eyes the instant he saw me, then turned to impatience. "What are you doing here? Get back inside," he barked at me, his tone dripping with contempt. "Don't come here and cause trouble. If you get hurt, we'll have to waste manpower saving you." Ella was there too, standing beside Carson, a silver javelin in her hand, her gaze fixed intently on the forest. She glanced at me and snorted derisively. "She's come to die, I suppose. Just as well. It'll save us the trouble of having to support this burden in the future." No sooner had she spoken than the first pack of stray wolves burst from the forest's edge. The wolves were massive, their coats coarse and filthy, their eyes flashing with a bloodthirsty ferocity. Leading them was a one-eyed black giant wolf, nearly twice the size of an ordinary wolf. Standing in the glow of the fire, it threw back its head and let out a roar, so thunderous it sent leaves rustling to the ground. The warriors of the Grey Rock Pack visibly flinched. Carson stood at the very front, gritting his teeth, but his hands were trembling slightly. I knew he was afraid. The stray wolves were far more powerful than the Grey Rock Pack. If we fought head-on, at least half of us would die today. Just as everyone was retreating, I took a step forward. As I walked past Carson, he reached out to stop me, but I sidestepped him with a light twist of my body. His fingers brushed the hem of my cloak, and in that instant, his eyes widened in shock. For he saw that wherever I had walked, the grass beneath my feet was withering and turning black, as if some invisible force had drained it of life. He opened his mouth to speak, but I had already stepped out of the crowd. Standing before the one-eyed giant wolf, I looked up. I was barely as tall as his forelegs, so frail it seemed he could crush me with a single swipe of his paw. The stray wolves froze for a moment, then burst into a raucous, savage laugh. Ha 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 ha! Is the Grey Rock Pack out of people, sending out a little vixen to die? The one-eyed giant wolf lowered his head, his foul breath blowing in my face. Soft and tender, she'll taste pretty good. I said nothing, but slowly raised my hand and gripped the spot on my left arm where the thin black line lay. Then I yanked hard, tearing open the seal line along with the flesh and skin, as if ripping away a layer of old bandage. Blood gushed out, but it evaporated into a dark purple mist the moment it hit the ground. The mist spread rapidly from me, radiating out from beneath my feet. Wherever it touched, grass withered, flowers wilted, and insects and ants perished. The laughter of the wandering wolf pack ceased abruptly. All the wolves retreated in unison, as if someone had seized them by the throat. The one-eyed giant wolf's body visibly stiffened, his single eye fixed on me, its pupil contracting violently with fear. His lips trembled as he uttered a name, his voice sounding like torn rags. Shadow. You're from the north. The corners of my mouth turned up slightly, revealing a smile that even I found unfamiliar. In that moment, the power sealed within me for 18 years burst forth from the depths of my body, like a wild horse breaking free from its reins, sweeping across the entire battlefield. I took a step forward. The dark purple mist wrapped around my ankles like a living thing, climbing up my calves. Wherever it touched, black patterns emerged on my skin, as if an ancient spell were being carved into my body stroke by stroke. Those patterns shimmered with the somber glow in the moonlight, possessing a beauty that did not belong to this world. A dangerous, suffocating beauty. The one-eyed giant wolf took a step back. His claws carved deep gouges into the ground, and he crouched low, the instinctive posture of the wolf clan when encountering a natural enemy, a mix of submission and vigilance, neither daring to attack nor to flee. The stray wolves behind him were in an uproar, retreating in small groups of 3 or 5. Some even began to whimper. Who are you? The one-eyed giant wolf's voice was hoarse beyond recognition. Didn't the bloodline of the Shadowfang clan die out 20 years ago? After that man wiped out 3 wolf packs, didn't he vanish without a trace? You can't be. How could you possibly be? I looked down at the markings on my arm. They were spreading toward my palm, and black mist was gathering at my fingertips. Under my will, the mist slowly shifted shape, sometimes like blades, sometimes like claws. I could feel their craving to tear something apart, to taste the warmth of fresh blood. This craving frightened even me. Yet at the same time, it made me feel utterly real. Vanished without a trace. I repeated those 4 words, then laughed. The laugh was soft, yet every wolf present heard it clearly. Do you think an alpha king vanishes without a trace because he's old and can't fight anymore? Or because he's afraid? I raised my right hand, spread my fingers, and the black mist rapidly condensed in my palm into a shadow sphere the size of a fist. It pulsed in my palm like a miniature heart, emitting a dull hum with every beat that made the surrounding air tremble slightly. The one-eyed giant wolf's pupils shrank to the size of pinheads. He spun around abruptly and let out a frantic retreating howl toward the pack behind him. The stray wolves, as if granted a pardon, turned and fled. The scene was as chaotic as a disturbed hornet's nest. Some collided with one another. Others even tripped their companions, then trampled over their bodies as they raced forward. But it was too late. With a flick of my wrist, the shadow orb flew from my hand. It traced a purple-black arc through the air and crashed into the ground in front of the one-eyed giant wolf like a meteor. With a thunderous boom, dirt and rubble exploded outward, carving a 3-meter-wide crater into the ground. The crater's edges were coated with a layer of writhing shadow substance, and the aura it emitted caused every wolf that neared it to let out a pained howl. The one-eyed giant wolf was knocked to the ground by the shockwave. He struggled to his feet, his right foreleg snapped clean off in the impact, the stark white bone protruding through the torn fur. He trembled all over from the pain, but he gritted his teeth and refused to cry out. I walked slowly toward him, crouched down, and tilted my head to look at him. Moonlight fell on my face, and my eyes, glowing with a purple light, stared straight into his. I said, "You asked me just now who I really am. I can tell you, but you need to think carefully about one thing. Those who know the answer usually don't live very long. After all, my father hates it when people find out he has another daughter out there." The one-eyed giant wolf's lips trembled. His gaze shifted from my face to the pack of gray wolves behind him, then back again. Finally, he lowered his head, slowly extending his broken right foreleg toward me, exposing the most vulnerable spot at the back of his neck. This was the wolf clan's most complete gesture of submission. Voluntarily exposing one's fatal weak point to an opponent was tantamount to placing one's life in their hands. Heir of Shadowfang, I concede. I am Barlow, leader of the wandering pack. I offer my loyalty, if you are willing to accept it. I didn't respond. I simply stood up, turned around, and looked at the members of the Grey Rock Pack behind me who had witnessed everything. Carson stood where he was, his expression too complex to describe. Surprise, confusion, unease, and something else I couldn't quite read, as if an emotion he had long forgotten was resurfacing. Ella stood beside him, her short spear hanging limply at her side. For the first time, the haughty look had vanished from her face, replaced by pallor and stiffness. And on the very edge of the crowd, those members of the Grey Rock Pack who had once mocked me, bullied me, and wounded me with their scornful glances and harsh words. They were all silent now, as if frozen in place. I saw Ryan, the younger brother of Carson, the same Carson who had shoved me and called me a failure on the training grounds that very afternoon. His face was deathly pale, his lips trembling. The moment my gaze fell upon him, he instinctively took a step back, hiding behind the person next to him. I stood there in the silence for about 10 seconds, then spoke. My voice was soft, but everyone heard me clearly. I've lived here for 18 years, always believing I was a part of this land. But today I realized I never truly belonged here, just as you never truly accepted me. My gaze fell on Carson. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but I didn't give him the chance. But there's one thing I need to make clear. Barlow and his pack of strays are now under my command. If you still want to lay a hand on him, don't worry about saving face with the Grey Rock Pack. Come straight to me. I turned and walked over to Barlow. I reached out, and a surge of shadow power enveloped his broken leg. With a few sharp cracks, I forcibly snapped the dislocated bones back into place. He let out a muffled groan, cold sweat pouring down his forehead in beads. But when he tried to move his leg, he found he could barely stand. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. Not just fear, but also a hint of reverence and recognition. I brushed the dust off my hands and looked up at the sky. The moon had already set in the west, and a faint pale glow was beginning to spread across the eastern horizon. A new day was about to dawn, and just then, from deep within the distant forest, a long drawn-out wolf howl echoed out. The sound was unlike the howls of either the Grey Rock Pack or the stray wolves. It carried an ancient, low resonance that seemed to transcend time and space, like the wind blowing through a glacial crevasse. The moment he heard that howl, Barlow's face turned even paler than it had been when I'd broken his leg. "They're coming," he said, his voice trembling with suppressed dread. "The Northern Hunt, the vanguard of the Shadowfang clan. My lord, the 3 months you spoke of, I'm afraid they've been cut down to 3 days." I narrowed my eyes and gazed into the depths of the forest. The darkness at the farthest edge of the tree line seemed to be shifting ever so slightly, as if some colossal creature were moving silently through the shadows. I could feel a powerful force drawing near, a force that resonated with the shadow power within me, making my blood boil and causing those black patterns to crawl involuntarily up my cheeks. I took a deep breath. Along with the scent of morning dew and earth, I detected a long-forgotten aroma etched deep within my bloodline. The cedars of the north, frozen lakes, and rust soaked in blood. It was the scent of home, and the scent of the battlefield. The pack of gray rock wolves standing behind me had no idea that a storm far more terrifying than any raid by a pack of stray wolves was advancing toward this barren forest. And that useless waste they had mocked for 18 years was about to become the source of that storm. That wolf howl pierced the calm I had just managed to establish like a needle. My heart gave a sudden jolt, not out of fear, but because that power felt all too familiar. It was like never having seen your own parents. Yet the moment you catch a whiff of their scent, your body recognizes them before your mind ever does. That deep, blood-bound resonance cannot be faked. Barlow stood beside me, dragging his broken leg, his voice hoarse and urgent. "My lord, the Northern Hunters are no ordinary pack of wolves. They are the elite vanguard of the Shadowfang clan, led by one of the 3 wolf generals who served your father. Wherever they go, their targets never leave alive. I know this because 5 years ago, I witnessed them wipe out a medium-sized tribe of 300 werewolves in a single night. By dawn, not a single intact skeleton remained." I stared into the writhing darkness deep within the forest, feeling the shadow power within me spill out uncontrollably, as if drawn by a magnet. The black patterns on my arm were spreading faster, already crawling up the side of my neck. I could feel them extending like branches toward my jawline. I could imagine how terrifying I must look right now. Behind me, the Grey Rock Wolf Pack had descended into complete chaos. Some were screaming, others were packing up to flee, and the elders were shouting for order, but no one was listening. The entire camp was like a pot of boiling porridge. Carson's voice cut through the chaos as he shouted at me, "What on earth did you provoke? Are those people after you?" I turned and looked at him. For the first time, I looked at him with an almost indifferent gaze. No sense of injustice, no anger, not even sadness remained. I simply looked at him calmly, as if he were a decent neighbor, nothing more. I didn't provoke them. They came looking for me, because by blood those wolves were meant for me. To be precise, they've come to take me home. "Take you home?" Carson's voice rose, tinged with a tension he might not even have realized himself. "Home to where? Spit it out. Who exactly are you?" Just as I was about to speak, the forest suddenly fell silent. All the chirping of insects and birds vanished in an instant. It was an absolute silence, as if the entire forest had been covered by a giant transparent dome, and every sound had been sucked away. Then I saw the wolves. They emerged from the shadows without a sound. No footsteps, no panting, not even the slightest rustle of breath. 9 wolves, arranged in 3 rows, each twice the size of an ordinary wolf. Their fur was pure black, the kind of black that reflects no light, appearing like moving shadows even in the moonlight. Their eyes were all deep purple, exactly like mine. The lead wolf bore a silvery crescent-shaped brand on his forehead that glowed faintly in the darkness. He stopped 20 meters away from me, and the other 8 wolves halted simultaneously, their movements as synchronized as if they were a single being. He lowered his head slightly, bent his hind legs, and stretched out his front legs, performing a flawless textbook gesture of submission, then spoke. His voice was deep, carrying an ancient resonance that seemed to come from the depths of a glacier. I am Blackblade, commander of the hunting pack under the Shadowfang clan of the Northern Wolves. By the command of our king, Rain Shadowfang, I have come to welcome Her Highness Liana Shadowfang, the sole heir of the Shadowfang bloodline, back to her rightful place. As those words left his lips, a collective gasp rose from the pack of grey wolves behind him. Then came a wave of hushed whispers. Shadowfang, the Shadowfang of the North. Isn't that the legendary clan? Who is this, Your Highness, he speaks of? Surely not. All eyes turned to me. Blackblade raised his head, his violet gaze lingering on my face for 3 seconds. Then a flicker of emotion, a mix of surprise and admiration, passed through his eyes. Your Highness, you have completed the first stage of your bloodline awakening, and it appears you already have your own followers. He glanced at Balo and nodded slightly. The leader of the Wandering Wolves, though his strength is average, he will at least serve as a capable bodyguard during the early stages of your awakening. Our king will be pleased with this. I furrowed my brow. Did my father send you here just to say all this? Why has 3 months turned into 3 days? Blackblade fell silent for a second, then lowered his voice slightly, as if the words that followed were not meant for too many ears. Because someone within the Grey Rock Pack leaked your identity to the outside world. 3 days ago, the very night your mate rejected you at the altar, a message reached the ears of hostile forces in the north. The orphan of Shadowfang is hiding among the Grey Rock Pack on the border. Your Highness, it is not only we who are searching for you. The Black Moon Church is already on its way. The Black Moon Church. The moment I heard those words, a vague image flashed through my mind. Black flames, a silver altar, a circle of people in black robes, a woman bound in the center. She turned to look at me. Her mouth was gagged, but her eyes were screaming at me. I couldn't hear what she was shouting, but I could feel the despair. Was that my mother? I didn't have time to think deeply about it, because Ryan suddenly burst out of the crowd. His face was as white as paper, and he pointed at Blackblade, his voice trembling uncontrollably. You're telling the truth. She really is the daughter of the Alpha King of the North. This good-for-nothing who can't even catch a rabbit. You're lying, aren't you? Blackfang didn't even glance at Ryan. He merely tilted his head slightly, and 2 of the 8 black wolves behind him moved simultaneously. No one could make out their movements. All they saw were 2 black shadows flash by, and then Ryan was lying face down on the ground, a black paw pressing down on the back of his head. His face pressed into the mud as he let out a muffled, struggling whimper. Blackfang's tone remained as flat as if he were discussing the day's weather. You lowly creature, you have no right to address the heir of the Shadowfang clan in that manner. According to the laws of the North, anyone who insults the royal bloodline shall have their skin flayed by the victim's own hand and be hung at the city gates for 3 days as a warning. But I see His Highness seems to harbor some lingering affection for this tribe. So I'll grant you a chance to live. Kneel before His Highness and apologize until she forgives you. Ryan lay trampled on the ground, trembling all over. Through the cracks in the mud, he looked at Carson, his eyes pleading for help. Carson clenched his fists. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he looked at me. His gaze was complex, as if 1,000 words were stuck in his throat. Yet he didn't know which one to say. I could feel him struggling. His pride, his dignity as the future alpha, and the remorse he'd just realized over the irreversible mistake he'd made were tearing at him from within. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. Liana, Is what they say true? Are you really the daughter of Shadowfang? I looked down at the black markings spreading across my arm, then touched the unmistakable purple glow on my cheek. Then I smiled, a smile tinged with self-mockery. Didn't you notice when you cut off the mark with a knife at the altar that day? As you sliced away, the blood that flowed wasn't red, it was dark purple. But you were too eager to rush toward that strong woman, so you didn't see it. I saw the color drain from Carson's face in an instant. His lips parted as if to explain, yet he couldn't find a single word to fill the void in his heart. Ella, standing beside him, looked just as pale. Her knuckles were white from gripping her short spear so tightly. But she couldn't utter a word, for the person standing before her now was no longer the worthless fool she could mock at will. I averted my gaze, no longer looking at him, and turned to Blackblade. I said, "How does my father want me to return? Does he want me to be escorted back to the castle in the north like a little princess in need of protection, surrounded by your troops, or has he given me another option?" A hint of a smile flashed in Blackblade's eyes, a recognition from warrior to warrior. "Your Highness truly lives up to being the bloodline of our king. Our king said that if you ask this question, we should hand this letter over to you." He pulled a yellowed parchment from the mane at his neck, clasped it between his teeth, and walked slowly toward me. Crouching on his front legs, he offered the letter to me with the utmost reverence. I unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was sharp and forceful, as if carved directly into the paper with claws. The message was brief, consisting of only 3 lines. "My daughter, if you are able to stand before me and read this letter to the end, it means you have passed the first test. But what I need is not a princess who can awaken, but an heir who can become a king. There are 3 rebellious wolf tribes in the north. I give you 3 months. Crush them and stain your crown with their blood. Then I will personally welcome you home. Rain, Shadowfang." I rolled up the parchment and clenched it in my palm. I felt the shadow power boiling within me. With every heartbeat, my pulse quickened, like a beast that had lain dormant for ages finally catching the scent of its prey. I lifted my head and gazed toward the eastern horizon. The dawn was tearing through the darkness, and golden light poured down through the gaps in the clouds, illuminating the land beneath my feet. Then I did something no one expected. I turned, walked up to Carson, and stood face to face with him, less than an arm's length away. I looked up into those golden eyes that once made my heart flutter. Now they were filled with shattered light. I reached out and patted his shoulder, using a touch so light it felt like I was patting an old friend I'd already said goodbye to. "Carson, thank you. Thank you for rejecting me when I was at my weakest. If you'd chosen to accept me back then, I might have spent my entire life in the Greyrock Pack, as a mediocre mate, raising a litter of mediocre pups, and growing old in mediocrity. But you made that choice for me. You pushed me onto the path that was meant for me, and I stand here today to tell you the truth. You don't deserve me. Not because I've grown stronger, but because from the very beginning, you were never qualified to be my mate. You chose Ella not because you loved her, but because you were afraid. You were afraid of the things about me you couldn't understand, afraid that a mate you couldn't fathom would make you lose control. So you chose the option that seemed safer. This proves you were never a true alpha. A true alpha dares to embrace the unknown, dares to trust a power he doesn't fully understand, and you're just a cowardly little boy hiding behind a tough exterior." Carson's pupils contracted sharply, and his words seemed to be squeezed out through clenched teeth. "Liana." I took a step back, turned around, and beckoned to Barlow. "Barlow, gather your pack of stray wolves and follow me." Then I faced Blackblade and said, "I've received your letter 3 months. I'll get it done, but before that, I need to go somewhere take me to the Shadowmoon tribe on the northern border. I've heard their chieftain was my mother's former captain of the guard. There are some things I need to ask him in person." Blackblade's ears pricked up slightly, and his gaze deepened. Your Highness, the Shadow Moon tribe is not among the 3 rebel targets designated by your father. I know. I stepped toward the forest, and the power of the shadows spread a path of deep purple beneath my feet. Every plant and tree that touched it withered instantly. But first, I must settle every debt owed to my mother, one by one. Only then will I deal with those rebellious tribes. Blackblade, if you think I'm acting on my own authority, you may go tell my father to choose a more obedient child to inherit the throne. But I suspect he didn't wait 18 years just for a puppet who only knows how to obey. Behind me came Blackblade's low chuckle. The first time I'd ever heard him laugh. Your Highness, those words are exactly the same as those spoken by our king all those years ago. The sun had just fully risen when I set out on the path to the Shadow Moon clan. Golden sunlight filtered through the gaps in the dense forest, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow on the ground. But the power of darkness spreading beneath my feet was like a moving black carpet, swallowing all those patterns whole. Blackblade and his 8 black wolves followed silently behind me, maintaining perfect formation. Balo led his pack of stray wolves to spread out on either side, forming a loose perimeter. Until this day, I had never had any followers by my side. But now I had a makeshift pack of nearly 50 wolves. Although most of them were stray wolves I had just tamed, and their loyalty remained to be tested. At least I was no longer that good, for nothing of the Grey Rock pack, sitting alone on a cliff and weeping in the moonlight. As we walked, Blackblade kept pace with me for a while. He turned his head and spoke in a voice only the 2 of us could hear. Your Highness, what you just said to that former mate, if I may be so bold, it was very much in the style of our king. I didn't turn around, my tone flat. I wasn't imitating him. Those words came to me that night after he rejected me. I sat on the cliff all night without shedding a single tear, and eventually came to this realization on my own. If someone chooses to leave you, no matter the reason, it can only mean one thing. You were never meant to be with them. Those words are my own. Blackblade fell silent for a few seconds, then whispered, Then I take back what I said earlier. You are indeed not an imitation. You are your own person. Your Highness, this is more important than possessing the power of the shadows. I didn't respond, but somewhere deep inside, a part of me quietly began to soften. We walked from noon until evening, passing through 3 forests, 2 streams, and a patch of abandoned farmland. The farther north we went, the colder the air grew, and the vegetation grew sparser, replaced by bare rock and dry tundra. The Shadow Moon tribe was situated in Bone Valley, on the edge of the Northlands, so named because it had once been a battlefield of the ancient wolf clans, with countless skeletal remains buried beneath the ground. It was said that on nights of the full moon, one could still hear the low howls of the dead. By the time we reached the entrance to the valley, darkness had already fallen. Towering black cliffs lined both sides of the canyon, their faces etched with ancient totems. Though severely weathered by the wind, the figures were still recognizable as a hybrid of man and wolf, hands raised toward the sky as if praying to some higher power. There were no lights, no campfires, not even a wisp of smoke rising from the canyon. It was as silent as a vast tomb. Balo whispered a warning from behind me. My lord, the Shadow Moon tribe has all but severed ties with the outside world in recent years. Rumors from outside say their old chieftain went mad after your mother's death, locking himself away deep in a cave and refusing to see anyone. Actual control of the tribe has long since fallen to his son, and his son is a very tough nut to crack. I nodded and stepped into the canyon's entrance. The power of the shadows spread silently beneath my feet, clearing the path for me. The totems on the rock walls flickered with a faint purple glow the moment they touched this power, then quickly faded. The canyon was deep. After walking for about the time it takes an incense stick to burn, the scene suddenly opened up before me, a vast basin enclosed by rock walls. In the very center of the basin, a campfire still burned, its light illuminating dozens of simple stone huts and animal skin tents scattered around it. But when I saw the scene within the basin, my footsteps halted. In the basin, all the wolves had taken human form. They knelt on the ground, heads bowed, facing the same direction. The entrance to the largest cave deep within the basin. The entrance to that cave was mostly blocked by a massive slab of stone, leaving only a narrow slit through which a faint, dusky blue glow seeped. A young voice came from the direction of the cave, tinged with wariness and hostility. "Who are you? Why have you entered our sacred ground with the power of the Shadowfang clan?" I looked in the direction of the voice, and a young man stepped out of the shadows of the campfire. He was about 25 or 26 years old, with brown hair tied in a high ponytail. His features were chiseled, possessing a wild, rugged handsomeness, yet his brow bore a deep weariness and gloom. His bare torso was covered in scars, some from blades, others from claws, layered upon one another like a shield that had been repaired time and again. His eyes were a rare amber hue, gleaming with a piercing light in the fire's glow. He looked me up and down, then furrowed his brow. "The bloodline of the Grey Rock Pack. No, your core power is Shadow Force. Are you Rain's daughter?" I met his gaze without flinching. "My name is Liana Shadowfang. 18 years ago, your father escorted my mother to the northern border. I need answers about what happened afterward." The young man's expression grew incredibly complex in an instant. Pain, anger, resignation. Several emotions flashed across his face before settling into a bitter smile. He took a deep breath and said, "My name is Cole, the current chieftain of the Shadow Moon clan. Your father's hunting party didn't notify us in advance that you were coming. Otherwise, we would have made some preparations. A less disheveled welcome ceremony." "I don't need a ceremony," I said. "I just want to know about my mother. She died shortly after I was born. How did she die, at whose hands, and why?" Cole was silent for a long time. Then he turned and walked toward the cave entrance, sealed with a stone slab. "Follow me. My father has been waiting for this day for 18 years. He walked up to the stone slab, placed both hands on it, and pushed hard. The slab emitted a dull rumble, and slowly slid to one side, revealing a deep, dark passageway. The passageway was filled with a musty odor, herbs, earth, and a faint, almost imperceptible scent of blood. Deep within the cave, that wisp of dusky blue light flickered in the darkness, like a restless soul. I followed Cole inside, behind us. Blackfang tried to follow, but Cole reached out to stop him. "What lies within belongs only to the bloodline of Shadowfang and the heir of the Shadow Moon clan. Everyone else, please wait at the entrance." Blackfang glanced at me. I nodded, and only then did he step back, lining up his 8 black wolves on either side of the entrance. The cave was deep, at least 100 meters, and the further we went, the colder it became. Our breath turned to white mist. When we reached the very depths, I witnessed a scene I would never forget for the rest of my life. An old man, so aged he barely resembled a human, was huddled among a pile of animal skins and dry grass. His hair was completely white, hanging in a tangled mess over his shoulders. His eyes were cloudy and hollow, but the moment he saw me they suddenly lit up, not like those of a man on the brink of death, but like a caged beast that had been imprisoned for far too long and had finally caught sight of the light. In a voice so hoarse it was barely audible, he tremblingly uttered a single word, "Elena." Elena, my mother's name. In all my years, this was the first time anyone had spoken her name in my presence. The old man's fingers clawed frantically at the animal hide, as if trying to grasp something invisible, but his body was too weak. He didn't even have the strength to sit up. Cole stepped forward quickly, gripped the old man's shoulders, and gently cradled him in his arms. Then, he looked up at me, his amber eyes brimming with repressed emotion. My father, Aldrich, the former chieftain of the Shadow Moon clan. 36 years ago, He was one of the mightiest wolf warriors. In the north, the left-wing vanguard under our king reign. But after what happened to your mother, he became the man you see before you now, eating and drinking nothing, speaking not a word, spending every day huddled in this cave, staring blankly at that name carved into the wall. Following Cole's gaze, I looked at the rock wall behind the old man. It was densely covered with carvings of the same name. Elena, Elena, Elena. Some were carved so deeply that stone chips had fallen away. Others were shallow, as if scratched out stroke by stroke with a fingernail. There were at least 1,000 such marks on that wall, layer upon layer, making my chest feel tight. The old man tremblingly reached out, pointing in my direction, tears welling up in his cloudy eyes. He wept with all his might, but his body was so withered he could produce few tears. All that emerged was a heart-wrenching sound, like a broken bellows. You look just like her. Your eyes are the same, your nose too, but you're thinner than she was. She had more flesh on her back then. At this point, the old man suddenly began coughing violently. Cole quickly patted him on the back. Once he'd caught his breath, I heard his hoarse voice again. When she left, she was your age, 18. No, she was 3 days short of 19 when she left. I crouched down next to the old man's animal hide and spoke very softly. Uncle Audric, I want to know how she died. Not some hearsay story, but the truth of what you saw with your own eyes. The old man's gaze suddenly sharpened. That intensity flashed for only an instant, but it confirmed one thing for me. He wasn't mad. He was merely pretending to be mad to protect himself. He was silent for a long time, so long that the only sound in the cave was the crackling of wood splitting in the fire. Then, in a voice of remarkable clarity, he spoke. Cole, go stand guard at the entrance. No one is to come in. What I'm about to tell you, across the entire living north, fewer than 3 people have heard the full story. Cole paused for a moment, then stood up without a word and strode out. As the stone slab slammed shut, with a thunderous roar, only Audric and I remained in the cave, along with the pale blue flame burning silently. The old man looked at me and spoke slowly, enunciating every word with deliberate emphasis. Your mother did not die of illness, nor did she die in childbirth, nor was she murdered by anyone. She was sacrificed. My heart sank. That day was the 7th day after your birth. Your father was away dealing with the border rebellion and was not in the northern capital. The Black Moon Church took advantage of the situation. They had long known your mother's identity. She was the last direct descendant of the ancient moon goddess's priestess, and her blood could unlock the forbidden book that the Black Moon Church had sealed for 300 years. They captured her and performed a sacrificial ritual in the underground altar of the northern capital. They used her blood to anoint the sealing stone, carved incantations into her bones, and used her soul as the key to unlock the altar. My fingernails dug into my palm, blood seeping out, but I felt no pain. So what did my father do when he returned? He went mad. A bitter smile twisted the old man's cracked lips. He slaughtered every Black Moon Church outpost in the northern realm, killing their 3 high priests and 17 guardians. But the mastermind, the one who orchestrated the entire sacrifice, he fled before your father could track him down, vanishing without a trace, taking with him the forbidden book activated by your mother's blood. Your father chased him for 7 long years, from the northlands to the southern wastes, from the snowfields to the desert, until he finally caught up with him on a cliff by the East Sea. And then, the old man lowered his head, his voice growing very soft. That mastermind right before your father's eyes turned to the final page of the forbidden book. The spell inscribed on that page was cast using your mother's soul as a medium. In that instant, your father saw your mother's soul trapped within the pages. The mastermind threatened him. If your father dared to act, he would tear that soul to shreds, causing your mother to vanish forever into the void. The cave was so quiet that all that could be heard was the crackling of the fire. So your father chose to yield. He let the mastermind go, returning to the royal city of the north with that incomplete forbidden book. From that day on, he never set foot outside the north again. He locked the book away in the deepest depths beneath the royal city, sealing it with 3 shadow chains, and then he locked himself inside the city as well. He sent you away, not because he didn't love you, but because he knew that the mastermind would return one day. He intended to spend the rest of his time preparing for a war in which, if he lost, he would be unable to protect you. My hands were trembling. From the moment I was rejected at the altar until now, I hadn't cried. But now my eyes began to sting, for the truth was far heavier and more crushing than I had ever imagined. My father didn't abandon me out of cold-heartedness. He was protecting me in his own way, by exiling himself, by imprisoning himself, by shouldering everything alone while bearing the immense pain of losing his partner. I steadied my breathing and asked that mastermind, "What is his name? What does he look like?" The old man closed his eyes, as if recalling a nightmare. He has no real name. The followers of the Black Moon Church call him the Shadow Lord. He always wears a black robe and a silver bone mask. No one has ever seen his true face. All we know is his voice. A voice you'll never forget for the rest of your life, light and soft, like a venomous snake flickering its tongue in your ear. Shadow Lord. I repeated the word, silently in my mind twice, etching it into my memory. What about the forbidden book? Since it's locked away beneath the royal city of the Northern Realm, is there any way to harness its power to do something? The old man's expression suddenly grew very complex. He stared at me for a long time, then slowly spoke. "Young prince, do you know why your father's seal happened to break on the very night you were rejected by your mate? It wasn't because of the pain of that boy's rejection itself, but because the Black Moon Church needed the emotional trauma you experienced as a coordinate to pinpoint your location. The moment your seal broke, they already knew you had awakened. The blood in my veins felt as though it had frozen solid. In other words, the moment I was rejected was not only a turning point in my life, but also a crucial part of their plan. If Carson hadn't rejected me, I wouldn't have suffered that mental breakdown on the cliff. The seal wouldn't have broken, and the Black Moon Church wouldn't have been able to locate me. But if the seal hadn't broken, I would never have grown stronger, never have learned the truth, and would have remained a mediocre little wolf kept in the dark forever. All of this had been orchestrated from the very beginning. The old man noticed the change in my expression. He coughed twice, then reached out with all his strength and gently grasped my wrist. His hand was as cold as stone, yet his grip was surprisingly firm. "Young prince, listen to me. Before she was taken away, your mother left something for you." "What is it?" "She left a fragment of memory with me. With her final strength, she sealed a memory within my soul and entrusted me to pass it on to you. She said that only on the day the power of the shadows fully awakens within you should this memory be given to you." And now, the old man closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then suddenly opened them wide, letting out a low wolfish howl from the depths of his gaunt chest. That howl was no ordinary sound. It carried a ball of silvery light that burst from the old man's mouth and shot straight toward the center of my forehead. I had no time to dodge. The light burrowed into my brain. In an instant, my vision was engulfed by a blinding white light. Then I saw a vision. A very young woman, her features bearing a striking resemblance to mine, with long silver white hair cascading to her waist. She stood in a snowy field, cradling a newborn baby in her arms. The infant was swaddled in black cloth, its tiny fists clenched tightly. It didn't cry or fuss, but simply gazed curiously at the woman, before it with a pair of violet eyes. The woman lowered her head, gently pressing her forehead against the baby's. Tears fell one by one onto the baby's cheek, yet a smile played at the corners of her mouth, her voice as gentle as a winter fireplace. My little Liana, if one day you read this memory, it means Mom is no longer here. Don't be sad. Every step I've taken was my own choice. Giving birth to you was the bravest and best decision I've ever made. I don't have much time left, so I can only tell you 3 things. You must remember them. First, your father is the best man in the world, but he doesn't know how to show it. He loves you more than his own life. If he ever does something to make you sad, it's because he doesn't know a better way to love you. Second, don't hate the one who rejected you, because one day you'll realize that every detour is a necessary part of the path leading to you. Third, and most importantly, the spell on the final page of the forbidden book wasn't meant to trap my soul. It was a trap I set for myself. If one day someone uses my soul to blackmail you, tell them, the bloodline of Elena Moonlight was never meant to be bound. It was meant to bite through an enemy's throat. The image faded slowly as the final word fell. I opened my eyes to find my face covered in tears. I don't remember when I started crying, but those tears were so hot they felt like they were burning through my cheeks. Old man Aldrich lay on the animal hide, his face as gray as if he might draw his last breath at any moment. But he was smiling. Your mother's memories. I've kept them for 18 years today. I finally handed them over. His voice grew fainter and fainter. Young princess, I've done all I could. The rest of the journey, you must walk alone. The old man's eyes slowly closed. His breath grew shallower and shallower until it vanished entirely. But the faint smile at the corner of his mouth never faded. I stood up, wiped the tears from my face, then bent down to pull the animal hide back over his peaceful face. I turned toward the cave entrance, the power of the shadows spreading silently beneath my feet. I was no longer just a pitiful creature abandoned by her mate, nor merely the daughter of the Alpha King who had just awakened her powers. I was Liana Shadowfang, the one chosen by fate, shaped by hatred, and blessed by the last remnant of my mother's memory. As I pushed aside the stone slab and stepped out of the cave, moonlight bathed my face. Cole's expression told me he had heard the commotion inside, but he asked nothing. He simply handed me a water skin in silence. Blackblade stood in the shadows, his eyes holding a resolve not that of a subordinate, but of a follower. Bolo and his pack of strays sat in a circle not far away, their bodies crouched facing outward, their watchful stances a testament to their loyalty. I took a sip of water, then looked around. My voice was soft, yet calm enough to silence all the wolves. In 3 days, we set out for the first rebellious tribe. But before that, I must settle one matter. Cole, young warriors of the Shadow Moon clan, who among you is willing to come with me? Cole paused for a moment, then turned to look at the young warriors gathered around the campfire. The Shadow Moon tribe fell silent for about 5 seconds. Then one by one they stood up. First, 3 young male wolves, then 2 female wolves, followed by more and younger pups who shifted into human form and stepped forward. And finally, even Cole's sister, a girl with 2 braids, who looked no older than 16 or 17, stepped forward. Cole looked at his sister, gave a wry smile, and said to me, "It seems the Shadow Moon tribe won't be missing from this battle." In the moonlight, the ranks behind me had grown from 50 to nearly 100, and the black patterns on my hand, without any conscious effort on my part, extended 3 inches forward, converging in the palm of my hand into a vague shape, a moon entwined with thorns. The totem of my mother's clan. In that moment I knew with absolute clarity she had accepted me. She is the moon goddess's daughter, and I am her daughter. Every debt owed by this bloodline, I will collect it all, one by one, with my own hands. For 3 days, I locked myself away in the most remote stone hut of the Shadow Moon clan. I wasn't sleeping, nor was I resting. I was trying to harness the power within me that had just awakened and was still surging wildly. The shadow power raged through my veins like a drunken beast, sometimes as cold as chains in an ice cellar, other times as hot as molten lava. It was an unpleasant sensation, but I gritted my teeth and endured it, because I knew deep down that what lay ahead wasn't a skirmish on the level of the Grey Rock Wolf Pack, but a real war. On the first day, I sat on the stone floor of the hut, letting the shadow power complete a full cycle along the patterns within my body. Black lines spread from my fingertips to my shoulders, from my shoulders to the back of my neck, and finally converged at the center of my forehead. The moment they converged, I saw a vision, a castle shrouded in black mist. Standing atop the highest tower was a silver-haired man. His violet eyes pierced the distance, staring straight at me. He spoke a single sentence without a sound, but I could see his lips move clearly. Go forward. The next day, I began practicing combat control. Cole brought me several of the Shadow Moon clan's toughest, middle-aged wolves to serve as sparring partners. The first one I faced was sent flying by a single slap of mine in less than 5 exchanges, crashing into and snapping 2 trees in his fall. It wasn't because I was strong, rather. The moment the shadow power made contact with his body, it automatically released a paralyzing effect that froze all his muscles, leaving him completely unable to defend himself. I looked at my palm and realized for the first time just how terrifying this power was. It wasn't just for attacking, but for control as well. If I wanted to, I could instantly render any creature I touched incapable of movement. On the evening of the 3rd day, I summoned Ballo and Blackclaw to my side. Blackclaw unfurled a map of the Northlands made from tanned sheepskin, on which 3 locations were marked with red dots. He pointed to the southernmost red dot on the map and tapped it with his tip. The Bloodclaw tribe, the weakest of the 3 rebel tribes, but also the closest to us. Their leader is named Thor, a 7-year-old hybrid wolf with mountain wolf lineage. He's a third larger than an ordinary wolf, with average speed but exceptional endurance. His tribe consists of roughly 300 warwolves and occupies a fertile hunting ground in the southwest corner of the Greystone Plains. I looked at the red dot on the map. The weakest one, exactly where is their weakness? A subtle flicker of emotion crossed Blackblade's eyes. The Bloodclaw tribe's greatest weakness is that their leader, Thor, is overly confident. Since annexing the 2 small neighboring tribes, he's won 7 or 8 consecutive small-scale skirmishes, and the entire tribe, from top to bottom, is permeated with an "we are invincible" arrogance. They hardly ever post night sentries, and their patrol routes are fixed. They never change. And Thor has a fatal habit. What kind of habit? He likes to publicly flaunt his battle achievements before a fight. Every time a battle begins, he has his wolf pack form a battle line. Then he walks to the front and raises a necklace made from the teeth of his previous victims for everyone to see. This ritual lasts about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. In other words, he gives his opponents a full incense stick's worth of time to observe and set up an ambush. But he's never encountered an opponent bold enough to exploit this weakness. I fell silent for a few seconds, then looked at the red dot on the map. He has 300 warwolves. Between us, the Shadow Moon clan, and your hunting party, we've got less than 150. In a head-on clash, even with the power of the shadow, I can't handle 300 wolves at once. Blackblade nodded. That's why we need a strategy. I stared at the map, my mind racing. The terrain of the Greystone Plains, flat, open, and with almost no cover. But what if we flanked around to the rocky hills on the southwest side of the plains? There are small undulations in the rock formations there, perfect for hiding troops and setting up an ambush. Plus, that area is less than 2 li from the Bloodclaw tribe's hunting grounds. At the wolves' speed, they could charge over in half an incense stick's time. I pointed to the rocky hills. Let's choose this as the site for the decisive battle. Blackblade, your hunting party will be responsible for luring the enemy from the front. You don't need to defeat them. You just need to draw Thor's main force into this hilly area. Ballo, have your men lie in ambush on both sides of the hills. Once the Bloodclaw tribe's werewolves enter the ambush zone, cut off their retreat. Cole, the young warriors of the Shadow Moon tribe, will join me in engaging them head on. When Thor finishes hanging his rotten teeth necklace in front of that lot, that will be our signal to attack. Ballo frowned. My lord, my men aren't very strong. They might not hold out long against 300 werewolves. I pulled that item from my bosom, an old leather pouch that old man Audric had pressed into my hand before he died. I opened it. Inside were 3 silvery, white feathers glowing with the soft moonlight. This was the second memento left by my mother, 3 celestial wolf feathers that had been offered at the altar of the moon goddess. It was said that when lit, they could summon a brief mist of moonlight to obscure vision and confuse sense. I handed 1 feather to Barlow. Once the battle begins, if you can't hold out, light this feather. The moonlight mist will buy you at least half an incense stick's worth of time to retreat. As Barlow took the feather, I sensed his hand trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from excitement. He had lived most of his life as the leader of a wandering wolf pack, constantly driven away by the major tribes like a stray dog. This was the first time he had been treated as a truly valuable combat asset. He carefully tucked the feather into the fur on his chest, then nodded firmly. By the time we finished discussing our tactics, night had fallen completely. I stepped out of the stone hut and saw the young warriors of the Shadow Moon clan gathered around the campfire, sharpening their weapons and inspecting their gear. Some were honing their claws, others were crafting makeshift armor plates from animal bones, and a few of the youngest were checking each other's fur for hidden ticks. The entire tribe was suffused with the unique tension and silence that precedes a great battle. No one was joking or roughhousing. No one was boasting of past exploits. Everyone was preparing in their own quiet way. Cole walked over to me and handed me a piece of roasted venison. I took a bite, and the juices melted in my mouth, carrying a hint of smoky aroma. It was the first hot meal I'd had in 3 days. Your eyes are different from 3 days ago, Cole said, sitting beside me, the firelight dancing across his profile. 3 days ago, your eyes were full of question marks. Who I am, what I should do, who I can trust. But now there's only a period in your eyes. What period? I know who I am, and I know what I'm supposed to do. As for who I can trust, he smiled and gave my shoulder a light nudge. That's not a question for me. It's one you have to ask yourself. Do you think I'm worth trusting? I turned to look at him. The contours of his profile were sharply defined in the firelight, and those amber eyes didn't flinch from my gaze. They met mine with unflinching honesty. I thought for a moment and said, "You're worth a try." Cole smiled. A smile devoid of frivolity, filled only with a sense of solid reliability. Then I'll make sure you don't have to make any mistakes. The next morning, before dawn had fully broken, the group set out. Over 100 wolves streamed out of the Shadow Moon clan's canyon in single file, like a gray river surging from the darkness, moving quietly and swiftly southward. Leading the way was Blackblade's hunting party, 9 jet black northern werewolves, like 9 shadows, scouted the path at the very front, leaving 1 wolf behind at regular intervals to serve as a signal node, ensuring uninterrupted communication throughout the entire pack. I followed in the middle of the pack, flanked by Cole and his sister Erin, the young girl with 2 braids. Erin ran with light, quiet steps, like a young lynx that had just learned to hunt. But I noticed her ears remained constantly on high alert. The slightest nocturnal sound would catch her attention. She noticed I was watching her and shyly lowered her head, but quickly raised it again, speaking in a tone that tried to sound mature. "My brother says you're the daughter of the Alpha King of the North. Is that true?" "It is. So, will you become the Queen of the North someday?" I paused for a moment, then replied, "I don't know, But if I do take that path, I hope it's not because of my bloodline, but because I have the ability to hold that position." Aaron blinked, as if weighing the meaning of those words, then said, "So the path you're walking now is part of that ability, right?" I didn't answer, but in my heart I felt a newfound respect for this young girl. Her understanding of power was far clearer than my own had been at 18. After running for nearly 3 hours, the group reached the edge of the Greystone Plains. We stopped to rest in a sparse grove of trees. Blackblade scouts reported that the Bloodclaw tribe's camp lay less than 5 miles ahead. They had just finished a large hunt and were roasting their game and drinking completely off guard. Blackblade crouched before me and whispered, "Your Highness, shall we proceed as planned?" I glanced at the sky. The sun hung high at noon. The light was bright and visibility was clear, not ideal conditions for an ambush. But if we waited until evening, the Bloodclaw tribe would be well fed and drunk, entering a period of heightened vigilance, making it harder to strike then. "We won't wait until evening. We'll strike now. They've been drinking. Their reactions will be a split second slower." I looked at Balo. He nodded and led his pack of stray wolves silently around toward the rocky hills. I turned to Cole. He took a deep breath and led the young warriors of the Shadow Moon clan to take up positions behind the low bushes at the front. I led Blackblade's hunting party and remained in the most conspicuous position on the front lines. I stood with 9 black Northland werewolves, right in the center of the Greystone Plains, facing the wind, waiting for the Bloodclaw tribe to spot us. I didn't have to wait long. The first Bloodclaw scouts appeared within our line of sight. They froze for 2 or 3 seconds upon seeing us, then turned and ran back toward the camp. Immediately, the entire Bloodclaw camp erupted like a disturbed hornet's nest. War cries, shouts, and the clang of weapons mingled into a chaotic din. In less than half an incense stick's time, nearly 300 werewolves had already formed a battle formation at the front of the camp. Thor stepped out of the formation. He was exactly as Blackblade had described, more than twice the size of an ordinary wolf, with gray fur as thick as a layer of iron armor. Around his neck hung a necklace strung with the teeth of his enemies, and trailing from his tail were several tatters of deep red cloth, likely torn from the body of some tribal chieftain he had slain. He stepped to the very front of the formation, and, as if performing some ritual, raised the necklace of teeth, shaking it in the sunlight so that it clattered. Then he spoke, his voice like gravel grinding against stone. "Ha, the mongrels of the Greyrock pack, the old, weak, and infirm of the Shadow Moon clan, plus a few black strays from the north. With this measly lot you dare set foot in the hunting grounds of my Bloodclaw tribe. Have you all had enough of living?" He hadn't recognized the bloodline of Shadowfang. To him, we were just a small, overconfident band of fools, come to meet our doom. I didn't reply, but stood where I was, watching him shake that necklace in silence. Blackblade whispered behind me, "Your Highness, he's been shaking it for 30 breaths now." I counted silently in my mind, 10 more breaths. I'd wait until the moment he let his guard down completely. 50 breaths. Thor finally lowered the necklace from the air and waved his paw behind him, signaling his werewolves to charge. 300 werewolves roared in unison, kicking up dust and making the earth tremble. In that moment, I raised my left hand. Black patterns shot out from my fingertips, spreading across my palm and up my entire arm. I took a deep breath as shadow power erupted from within me, forming a purple-black barrier under the sunlight that enveloped me and the 9 black wolves behind me. Then, I took a step forward, just one step, and my wolf form began to shift uncontrollably on its own. This was the first time in 18 years that I had transformed of my own volition. My bones stretched, my muscles swelled, and fur surged wildly from my pores. The speed of the transformation astonished even me. In less than 3 seconds, I had transformed from a human form girl into a massive pitch-black wolf, comparable in size to Thor. My eyes burned with purple flames, and the ground beneath my paws began to wither and crack under the corrosive power of the shadow force. Thor's charging stride came to an abrupt halt. The moment he met my gaze, I saw the fear in his pupils with crystal clarity. He had finally recognized the bloodline mark of Shadowfang. But it was too late. I threw back my head and let out a roar that shook the plains. A sound wrapped in the power of the shadows that swept across the entire battlefield like an invisible shockwave. Of the 300 werewolves of the Bloodclaw tribe, at least 30 froze in their tracks the instant they heard that roar, some even beginning to retreat. It was an instinct etched deepest into the wolf bloodline. Faced with the overwhelming might of the northern royal lineage, the fighting spirit of lower-ranking wolves would shatter like paper. Thor gritted his teeth and roared as he lunged at me. I sidestepped, and his sharp claws grazed my ear, sending a trail of blood droplets flying. The pain did not weaken me. Instead, it made the shadow power within me rage even more fiercely. Instead of retreating, I charged forward, ramming my forehead hard into his jaw. The massive impact sent him reeling backward. Seizing the opportunity, I sank my teeth into the joint of his foreleg. Teeth piercing fur, tearing through muscle, biting down on bone. As the shadow power surged through my teeth into his wound, Thor let out a scream and tried to shake me off, but I held on tight, refusing to let go. The shadow power spread through his blood. I could feel his limbs growing stiffer and colder in my mouth. The paralyzing effect of my power, suffocating his fighting ability. Just then, the war cries of Belos' men rang out from both sides of the hills. The Bloodclaw tribe's war wolves realized they were surrounded, and the dust rising from behind them revealed their retreat had been cut off. Their formation began to crumble. Thor collapsed to the ground, his right foreleg completely numb. He gasped for breath, looking up at me with a gaze mingled with anger and deep helplessness. His lips trembled, his voice bitter and hoarse. "Your father, he sent you, didn't he? He intends to wipe out every tribe that resists him, one by one, just as he did with the Black Moon Church back then." I looked down at him and released my grip on his foreleg. Blood dripped from the corner of my mouth, leaving a dark red stain on the ground in the sunlight. I spoke, my voice low and rough with the resonance of my wolf form, yet every word was as clear as a branding iron. "My father sent me not because I'm unworthy, but because this is the first test he's given me. If I can't even pass this test with you, I have no right to stand before him again. Thor, your tribe had 3 times my numbers, yet you were scattered in less than the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. Not because you're weak, but because you trusted your tooth necklace too much." Thor closed his eyes and remained silent for a long time. "I have lost. The Bloodclaw tribe surrenders." He dropped to the ground, exposing the back of his neck. The Bloodclaw werewolves still fighting behind him saw their leader's gesture of submission, and one by one ceased their battle, dropped their weapons, and lowered their bodies. The entire battlefield fell silent in less than the time it takes to eat a meal. I stood on the battlefield as the wind stirred the dust from my black fur. The sunlight fell directly at my feet, illuminating the desolate, shadow-corroded land and the chaos behind me with stark clarity. I looked at the old wolf before me, a warrior who had fought his entire life, now exposing his most vulnerable neck to me. It was a complete, unreserved trust and submission. A voice inside me said, "This is the first battle you have won." Then another, deeper voice added, "But there are many more battles waiting for you ahead." The campfire crackled, and sparks were swept up by the night breeze, swirling into the darkness. I stood before Cedric. He was so tall that I had to tilt my head back slightly to see his face. His features, like old man Aldrich's, were etched with the marks of time and the scars of battle. But those eyes, one gray, one purple, held a warmth entirely different from my father's. It was the warmth of an uncle, laced with guilt, a belated desire to protect me, and a cautious fear that I might reject him. I spoke, my voice calmer than I had expected. My mother never mentioned having an older brother. And if you really exist, why haven't you come looking for me in the past 18 years? Cedric's gaze darkened for a moment. He slowly sat back down by the campfire, picked up the twig, and began poking at the embers again, moving very slowly as if gathering his thoughts. Because I was exiled by your father. What? I wasn't there the day your mother was taken away by the Black Moon Church. I was leading a patrol along the northern border. By the time I heard the news and rushed back, the altar was empty and your mother's blood had already run dry. Your father sealed the underground altar in the royal city with shadow chains and locked himself inside for 7 full days. When he emerged on the 7th day, the first thing he did was announce my exile. The charges were dereliction of duty and failure to protect a member of the royal family. He said I was your mother's captain of the guard, yet when she needed me most, I was out hunting rabbits on the frontier. As Cedric spoke those final words, a self-deprecating smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, though the laughter did not reach his eyes. He banished me from the north, forbidding me ever to set foot on the lands of the Shadowfang royal house again. I've been a wanderer ever since. For the past 18 years, I've drifted between the southern wastes and the East Sea, tracking clues about the Black Moon Church and searching for the Shadow Lord's trail. It took me 10 years to discover that the one who provided intelligence to the Black Moon Church and orchestrated the shift of the altar guards back then was no outsider. He looked up, his violet eye glowing like a burning amethyst in the firelight. It was one of your father's closest confidants, the chief strategist of the northern capital, Maurice. My breath caught. That name rang a bell. In that brief letter my father had written to me, barely 2.5 lines long, beside his own shadow seal at the bottom, there was a tiny, almost imperceptible additional mark, the ancient Wolf Clan abbreviation for the character Mo. At the time, I'd assumed it was merely standard court protocol. Looking back now, that letter itself was a veiled warning. He was telling me there was a mole within the royal court, and that everyone around me, including his most trusted confidants, could be one of the conspirators. Cedric continued, by the time I uncovered this, Maurice had already served as your father's chief advisor for 16 years and enjoyed his complete trust. I had no direct evidence to prove he was a member of the Black Moon cult, because all relevant written records had been destroyed. Only one living person knew the full details of the troop redeployment plan from back then. Maurice himself. Your father knew nothing of this. If I had returned to the royal city rashly, not only would I have failed to gain his trust, but I would have immediately alerted the enemy, allowing Maurice to close in on us prematurely. He paused, tossed the burnt-out twig into the fire, stood up, and looked me in the eye, as if trying to see right through me. So I've been waiting for an opportunity, waiting for you to grow up, waiting for someone strong enough, clear-headed enough, and worthy enough to stand before me. I knew of your existence the moment your father sent that letter, but I couldn't go to you then because you were too weak. A young she-wolf who couldn't even control her wolf form would only become a sitting duck for the Black Moon Church if she learned these truths. But now, it's different. He took a step forward, placed his left hand over his heart, and bowed his head slightly, performing an ancient ritual understood only within the Northern Realm's royal family. The Elder's acknowledgement of the heir. You have already taken the first step, won your first major battle, subdued a rebellious tribe, and stood before me without flinching. You have proven yourself worthy of knowing the entire truth. That is why I am here. What followed was a statement that sent a chill down my spine, each word driving into my ears like a nail. In 3 months, your father will hold a formal ceremony in the capital to proclaim you the heir. At that time, the chieftains of all the northern tribes, representatives of the subordinate wolf clans, and envoys from the major powers along the borders of the East Sea and the southern wastes will all gather in the capital to witness the ceremony. Morris has already laid out his plan. On the day of the ceremony, he will harness the residual power of the forbidden book left behind when your mother was sacrificed years ago to instigate a massive shadow uprising. He intends to wipe out all the high-ranking Wolf clan members present in one fell swoop, then seize the opportunity to install a puppet under his mental control, thereby taking complete control of the North. But to trigger that uprising, a key is needed: your blood. Since you are your mother's only direct descendant, your blood can activate the residual soul imprint she left within the forbidden book. Once your blood is dripped onto the altar during the ceremony, the uprising will begin and everyone present will die except for Morris's men. The wind suddenly picked up, causing the campfire to sway violently. The flickering light danced between Cedric and me, casting shifting shadows over the contours of his scars. I lowered my head, staring at the ground, and remained silent for a long time before speaking. So, in other words, my father sent me to conquer 3 rebellious tribes and ordered me to return to the capital in 3 months for the succession ceremony. Both of these tasks were traps set by Maurice. The farther I go and the higher I climb, the closer I get to the altar he has prepared for me. Yes. Then, should I keep going? Cedric was silent for a moment. If you stop now, I can use my own methods to get you safely out of the North, to any place Maurice can't find. I looked up, and if I keep going, his violet eyes flashed briefly in the firelight. If you keep going, you'll walk right into the trap he's set, crush every trap he's meticulously prepared, and in front of all the powers of the North wring his head off and hang it on your father's throne. Which do you think is more in line with your mother's style? I looked down at the black patterns on my right arm, which had spread another inch since a few days ago. They wound around my skin like living vines, emitting a faint purple glow. Then I looked up into Cedric's eyes, which were exactly the same color as mine. You've been in exile for 18 years. I doubt you've had a proper northern roast in all that time. Have you? Cedric paused, then a smile slowly spread across his face. A smile tinged with surprise, relief, and a long overdue sense of ease. You're far more articulate than your mother. I turned toward the camp, my voice cutting through the night. Come on. The Bloodclaw tribe just finished hunting, so there's plenty of venison. After we eat, we'll discuss at length how to add another dish to the menu for that chief advisor on my father's throne. That barbecue lasted a long time. We stoked the campfire 3 times, and the stars shifted bit by bit across the night sky above us. Cedric sat across from me, whittling a stick with a small knife he carried with him. He worked slowly, as if this motion were helping him sort through the tangled web of thoughts that had accumulated in his heart over the past 18 years. Meanwhile, in the flickering light of the fire, I pieced all the information together into a complete picture. 3 rebellious tribes, a mole lurking within the royal capital, a sacrificial ritual planned over 18 years, and a forbidden book locked underground, its pages made from my mother's soul. The problem now was that I had only 3 months. Within those 3 months, I not only had to crush the remaining 2 rebellious tribes, but also expose Morris's plan in front of everyone during the succession ceremony in the royal capital. Time was so tight it felt like I was running with someone's hand clamped around my throat. But I didn't want to play by his rules. Since he wanted me to walk into his trap in 3 months' time, I'd be the one to throw him off balance first. I swallowed the last piece of venison, wiped my hands, and said to Cedric, "Do you know what's in shortest supply in the Iron Skull tribe swamplands?" Cedric raised an eyebrow. Dry ground, visibility, reinforcements? Food, I said. According to Thor's intelligence, after the Iron Skull tribe took over that swamp, most of the surrounding game migrated away due to water contamination. They're now surviving mainly on stored jerky and the occasional prey they catch in the northern woodlands. Their food reserves will last another month at most. That's why they're holding their ground. It's not that they don't want to fight, but they're too weak from hunger to do so. They can only rely on the terrain to buy time. Cedric stopped whittling the wood, his expression turning serious. So you want to surround them without attacking, waiting until they're starved enough to come out on their own. No, surrounding them without attacking is too slow. I don't have that much time. I bent down and sketched a rough map of the terrain on the ground beside the fire with my finger. There's an underground stream in the northwest corner of the marsh. It's the only water supply line for this area. If I can make the water in that stream taste foul, so that the Iron Skull Tribe's werewolves get diarrhea, lose their strength and lose their will to fight after drinking it, then holding on to that marsh will no longer serve any purpose. At that point, they'll have only two choices: either come out and surrender, or stay in the swamp eating their dried meat until there's not a single grain left, then starve until they can't even lift a paw. Cedric stared at the map on the ground, silent for a long while, then looked up at me, a complex gleam in his eyes. When your mother was 18, she was still thinking about how to weave a wildflower into a wreath to wear on her head. But when you were 18, you were already thinking about how to use an underground river to wipe out a tribe. His words left me stunned for a moment. I had never compared myself to my mother before, but at that moment I suddenly realized the path I had chosen was indeed completely different from hers. She was a priestess in the moonlight, gentle and pure, like a tranquil poem. As for me, I was a hunter in the night, cool and sharp like a poison-tipped dagger. She didn't have to walk this path because Father stood in front of her to shield her, I said. But I'm different. There's no one in front of me. I have to walk this path alone and defend myself. Cedric said nothing more. He simply reached out and gently patted the top of my head. That rough, calloused hand lingered on my hair for a moment. It was a very light touch, so light it was almost imperceptible, but I knew it was a touch from a loved one that was 18 years overdue. Early the next morning, before dawn had fully broken, we set out for the misty marshes, home of the Iron Skull Tribe. Our ranks were somewhat larger than when we'd come. Thor had drawn 50 battle-hardened werewolves from the Bloodclaw tribe to join my ranks, a sort of pledge of allegiance following his submission, combined with Blackblade's hunting party, Bullow's pack of stray wolves, the young warriors of the Shadowmoon tribe led by Kor, and the 7 elite guards Cedric had brought. Our total numbers were nearing 200. The outskirts of the misty swamp were even more desolate than I had imagined. The air was thick with a damp, musty stench, deep green mud pools, and stunted dead trees were everywhere, and a grayish-white mist crept along the ground, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Deep within the swamp, I could faintly make out wisps of smoke rising through gaps in the tree canopy. That was the location of the Iron Skull Tribe's camp. Blackblade released a trained gray falcon, sending it deep into the swamp with a small piece of leather soaked in a special scent. This was an ancient method of reconnaissance. Wherever the gray falcon flew, its scent would briefly cling to the vegetation and the water's surface. If the Iron Skull Tribe's patrols came into contact with those spots, the scent would transfer to them, allowing Blackblade to track their patrol routes and rotation patterns in reverse. While waiting for the gerfalcon to return, I led Ballo and several Bloodclaw veterans, familiar with the swamp terrain, to the upper reaches of the underground river. The river's entrance was hidden behind a dense thicket of red osier. The water looked no different from ordinary swamp water, murky greenish-blue with dead leaves and algae floating on the surface. But according to the information provided by Thor, as the water flows through the underground rock layers, it passes through a sulfur-rich vein. So the water naturally carries a faint sulfuric scent, a smell the Iron Skull Tribe's wolves have long grown accustomed to. This gave me exactly the opening I needed. If I were to release something upstream that smelled like sulfur, but had a completely different effect, they wouldn't notice anything amiss at first. I crouched by the underground river, dipped my fingertip in the water, and tasted it on the tip of my tongue. It was bitter with a faint hint of sulfur, indeed their daily water source. I stood up and asked Cedric, I brought some dried blood scorpion tail spines from the bloodclaw tribe. When ground into powder and mixed with water, it's colorless and odorless, but it causes severe abdominal pain and vomiting in the drinker 1 to 2 hours later. The bloodclaw tribe used to use it against invaders, and it worked very well. Cedric furrowed his brow slightly upon hearing this. But you just said this water already has a sulfuric odor. If mixing in the blood scorpion tail powder doesn't alter the taste at all, it would indeed be difficult for the Iron Skull tribe to detect it in advance. The problem is, how can you ensure only the Iron Skull tribe drinks it, without affecting the other tribes in the surrounding area? The underground channel structure of this hidden river ensures its flow leads only to the central region of the Mist Swamp, which is under the Iron Skull tribe's control. After leaving the swamp, the water passes through 3 natural filtration layers. The toxins will be absorbed and broken down by the rock strata and vegetation, so it won't affect the other tribes downstream. I brushed the mud off my hands. If you're still unsure, we can test it on a few wild rabbits first. Ballo, listening nearby, twitched his lips slightly and murmured in a tone that was half admiration, half complexity, "My lord, have you truly been awakened for less than a week?" "Some things can be learned without awakening," I said. During those 18 years I spent as a good 4, nothing in the Grey Rock Wolf Pack, aside from being bullied, I spent the rest of my time observing, memorizing, and pondering. The properties of every poisonous plant and every type of venomous insect on this continent are etched in my mind. Do you think I just cried on that cliff? No, I recited these things while I cried, because Martha once told me that knowledge is sometimes deadlier than fangs. It took us half a day to complete the preliminary preparations for poisoning the dark river. The finely ground stings of the blood scorpions were divided into 5 portions, wrapped in waterproofed animal hides, and carried by Barlow and the most stealthy of the stray wolves as they slipped into the 5 release points upstream under the cover of night. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but less than an incense stick's worth of time after Barlow set out, Cedric suddenly strode in from the edge of the camp. His pace carried a sense of urgency born of high alert, an expression I rarely saw on his face. He walked up to me and handed over a dew-covered leaf. Its surface bore several clear, fresh scratch marks, the encrypted messaging symbols used exclusively by the royal family of the North. News from the capital. It wasn't sent through official channels. It was relayed by an informant using the most covert means possible, Cedric said in a hushed voice. Morris already knows you took down the Bloodclaw tribe in just 2 days. His reaction has been faster than we anticipated. He's dispatched 3 additional assassination squads to infiltrate the outskirts of the Misty Marshes. Their orders are clear. At any cost, they are to intercept and kill you here before you enter the Iron Skull tribe's territory. He flipped the leaf over, revealing the final line of text on the reverse side. The line was short, yet it felt like a boulder crashing into my chest. He specifically noted in the message, "Once the deed is done, bring your body back to the royal city intact." He intends to use your blood during the succession ceremony to complete the sacrifice that was left unfinished 18 years ago. The intelligence report lingered in my fingertips for 3 seconds. Then I tossed it into the campfire, watching it curl, blacken, and turn to ash. The air around us fell silent for a moment, and everyone gathered around the fire stopped what they were doing to look at me. Cole, Aaron, Blackblade, Cedric, Barlow, and the veteran Bloodclaw warriors who had just sworn allegiance. They were all waiting for me to speak. I stood up, brushed the ash from my hands, and spoke with a calmness that even surprised me. 3 assassination squads. It sounds like a lot, but if they're scattered around the edges of the Mist Swamp, their communication won't be very tight. This is a swamp, not an open plain. They can't maintain unified command or advance in coordination. If we can first figure out their routes into the swamp, split them up and take them out one by one, then they won't be hunters. They'll be supplies delivered right to our doorstep. Black Blade was the first to speak. Your Highness, let me lead the hunter squad to scout the area. I have experience in tracking and evading pursuit in swampy terrain. Give me 2 hours, and I can pinpoint the locations of all 3 squads. I nodded. Proceed with caution. Do not alert them. More importantly, do not alert the Iron Skull tribe. My plan to poison them must proceed as scheduled. We cannot let Morris's men disrupt our rhythm. If they discover 2 separate forces operating outside the Iron Skull tribe's camp at the same time, they will likely retreat deep into the swamp and entrench themselves completely. At that point, luring them out will be difficult. Black Blade and his 9 black wolves slipped into the night mist of the swamp as silently as a black current. The rest of the team, following my orders, extinguished all the campfires and retreated to a slightly elevated, dry patch of woodland to stand by. With no light and no sound, we were like a stone embedded in the darkness, waiting for the moment our prey stepped into our trap. The wait always drags on. Erin sat beside me, repeatedly running her fingers over a polished wolf's tooth pendant, a talisman every young warrior of the Shadow Moon clan received upon coming of age. She said nothing, but the movement of her fingers betrayed her inner tension. She was only 16 this year. According to the customs of the Northern Wolf clan, she hadn't even reached the official age for combat. Yet her brother Cole had brought her here, and she herself hadn't backed down. I reached out and gently patted her shoulder, saying nothing. She glanced up at me, a surprising calm flashing in her young eyes, then nodded. She clenched the wolf's fang pendant in her hand and tucked it into her palm. About an hour and a half later, a faint bird call came from deep within the swamp. It wasn't a real bird, but the signal Black Blade and the hunting party had agreed upon. 2 short notes signaled, enemy location confirmed, preparing to return. Another incense stick's worth of time passed before Black Blade's figure emerged from the mist. His fur was caked with the swamp's muddy water, and his breathing was slightly faster than usual, but his stride remained steady. He walked over to me, crouched down, and traced a rough map of the area on the ground with his claws. 3 squads, totaling about 40 to 50 adult wolves. All are operating in human form, clad in dark cloaks, and uniformly armed with short-handled battle axes and poison-tipped daggers. Their infiltration route split into 3 directions as they enter the swamp. The northern squad is advancing along the Deadwood River channel, the route closest to the Iron Skull tribe's camp. The southeastern squad is moving along the mangrove forests at the edge of the swamp. They're likely tasked with cutting off our retreat. The western squad is taking the dried-up old riverbed, which places them right between our group and the Iron Skull tribe's camp. At their current pace, the western squad will make contact with our outpost by dawn at the latest. I mentally mapped out the relative positions of both sides. The western column was the closest to us and posed the most immediate threat, but it was also the easiest to cut off, since the old riverbed it occupied was flanked on both sides by deep quagmires. Once fighting broke out, their reinforcements would struggle to cross the vast swampy terrain quickly enough to come to their aid. Let's take out the western squad first, I said. We'll move fast and quietly. Once that's done, we'll immediately shift positions so the other 2 squads can't figure out our direction of movement. Cedric, Barlow, and I will lead 18 war wolves in a frontal assault. Black Blade, you and the hunting squad will set an ambush upstream on the riverbed to prevent any survivors from escaping upstream. Cole, you and the Shadow Moon clan stay at camp to guard the supplies and the wounded, and be ready to provide backup at a moment's notice. Cole clearly wasn't happy with this arrangement. Warriors his age always want to be at the forefront of the battle, but he glanced at Cedric beside me, then at the black markings on my arm that glowed faintly in the night, and finally just nodded, muttering, "Be careful." Cole immediately turned to organize the Shadow Moon clan's defensive line. Meanwhile, Cedric, Barlow, and I, accompanied by 18 hand-picked werewolves, slipped silently from the edge of the woods into the swamp without a single flame or command. Making our way toward the section of the old riverbed, the fog grew thicker, and the mud beneath our feet grew softer. With every step, we had to be careful not to sink into a bottomless quagmire. In this environment, my shadow power actually became an advantage. I could sense changes in the density of the soil through the black pattern spreading beneath my feet. Which patches of ground were solid, and which were hollow was crystal clear to me. After about half an hour, we reached the edge of the old riverbed. I crouched behind a moss-covered rock, and through gaps in the thick fog, observed the movements of the assassination squad to the west. They were indeed highly professional 8 wolves, all in human form, clad in dark cloaks, advancing slowly in a tight fan formation. They maintained a distance of 3 to 5 paces between each other at all times, ensuring that if any one of them came under attack, the companions on either side could provide immediate support. The wolf leading the pack walked at the very front. His temples were already streaked with gray, and his steps were so steady, they made almost no sound. He was clearly a veteran who had seen countless battles. But I noticed a detail. Their attention was entirely focused on the front and the flanks. Very few of them looked back to check their rear. This made perfect sense. They were hunters, and they assumed their rear was secure. The only directions requiring vigilance were the front and the flanks, and this gave me the opening to strike from behind. I made a gesture backward, and the 18 war wolves behind me silently spread out, flanking them from both sides. Cedric and I remained at the front, waiting for the moment when their attention was fully focused on the front. The squad advanced another 50 paces or so. The silver-maned old wolf leading them stopped, crouched down, dipped a finger in the mud on the ground, brought it to his nose to sniff, then muttered something under his breath. The distance was too great for me to make out the words, but I saw the entire squad come to an immediate halt, every member shifting from an advancing stance to a state of alert. What had they discovered? Had they picked up our scent, or detected some other anomaly in the marsh? Just as I was about to give the order to strike, a short, agonized scream suddenly rang out from the east side of the old riverbed, followed by the sounds of fierce combat and clashing metal. The moment they heard the noise, the assassination squad turned en masse toward the east and formed a defensive formation. But it was too late. From the mist to the east, a group of figures burst forth. These were not our men. They were a pack of giant wolves, their bodies caked in swamp mud and their fur encrusted with water plants. The lead wolf was exceptionally massive. Its snow-white fur stained a mottled gray, brown by the mud. Roaring, it charged into the assassination squad's formation, swiping its paw to send the outermost axe, wielding wolf flying, smashing him into a dead tree. It was the Iron Skull tribe. Weren't they supposed to be holed up deep in the swamp, waiting for us to surround them? How did they end up here? And why are they attacking not us, but the Black Moon Church's assassination squad? All these questions flashed through my mind, but I had no time to dwell on them, because led by that albino old wolf, the Iron Skull tribe's werewolves had already scattered Morris's assassination squad to the 4 winds. But those wolves from the assassination squad were no pushovers either. After the initial chaos, they quickly organized a counterattack. Both sides became entangled in a melee within the muddy old riverbed, blades and claws flashing through the mist as blood and mud splattered everywhere. Below asked me in a hushed voice, "My lord, what should we do? Which side should we support?" I looked out at the chaotic battlefield. Moonlight pierced the mist, illuminating the mottled white fur of the albino old wolf. His movements were fierce and precise. Nearly every swipe of his claws took down an enemy. Then I made a decision, one that could change the entire course of the battle. Help the Iron Skull tribe. Barlow's eyes widened. "My lord, that's the tribe we're targeting. We came here to fight them. They are the target, but Morris's men are my top priority to eliminate." And I fixed my gaze on the figure of the albino wolf. The fact that he chose to strike proactively at this exact moment, precisely targeting Morris's men, means he's already aware of the Black Moon Church's infiltration into his territory. He's not stupid, he knows who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. If I go up there now to help him fight Morris's men, we might actually have a chance to negotiate. I burst out from behind the rock cover, unleashing a black shockwave of shadow power beneath my feet as I charged straight into the thickest part of the melee. I sensed that the moment the assassination squad members saw the black markings on my body, the look in their eyes wasn't mere anger, but a mix of astonishment and greed at suddenly having their target appear before them. They recognized me. That albino old wolf also paused briefly the moment I charged into the fray. His eyes, tinged with a pale red due to albinism, looked at me through the mist, his gaze lingering on my purple pupils for 2 or 3 seconds. He didn't attack me immediately. He merely tilted his head slightly, a posture of observation and assessment. And I, in that moment, took the most direct action of the entire operation. I grabbed the collar of the closest member of the assassination squad, yanked him out of the mud, and whispered a sentence into his ear. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough. Tell Morris he sent too few men. If he really wants me dead, he'd better come himself next time. I held the wolf from the assassination squad aloft, his feet kicking futilely in the muddy water, a gurgling sound coming from his throat, as if he had something to say but was choked by fear. I let go, and he fell into the mud, scrambling and crawling toward the northern edge of the old riverbed. I didn't chase him, because a man who returns alive to deliver a message is worth more than a corpse. He knew I was here, knew who was with me, and knew just how dangerous I was. Information that, once relayed to Morris, would make that old fox hesitate 3 seconds longer with every move he made. And, on the battlefield, 3 seconds of hesitation is enough to decide life or death. When the remaining members of the assassination squad saw me let a captive go without hesitation, cracks began to show in their fighting spirit. Their orders were to eliminate me, but those orders didn't tell them that a white-furred elder wolf from the Iron Skull tribe would be standing by my side. The moment I charged into the fray, the elder wolf of the Iron Skull tribe had already discerned my allegiance. He didn't choose to stand by and watch. Instead, with a short, sharp howl, he summoned his pack to completely surround the remaining members of the assassination squad. A stick of incense later, nearly 20 corpses clad in dark cloaks lay strewn haphazardly across the muddy ground of the old riverbed. The few stragglers who attempted to break through were intercepted by the hunting party at the edge of the swamp and eliminated without exception. I stood where I was, my chest rising and falling slightly. A warm, salty, bloody substance had splattered onto my arm. It wasn't my blood. I glanced down, wiped it away with my thumb, then turned to face the albino old wolf. He stood less than 10 paces away, his mottled white fur soaked through with mud and blood. Those pale red eyes were fixed squarely on me, neither intensely hostile nor warmly friendly, but rather the distinctive gaze of a seasoned hunter scrutinizing a novice. He spoke first. "Your Rain's daughter, I am. You've trampled over the Black Moon Church's assassins to come to my territory. Are you trying to tell me you're not one of them?" He scratched the mud from his neck with his hind leg, the motion as casual as if he were chatting about the weather. "If I wanted to fight you, I wouldn't have helped you kill them. You know full well that with the few men you had just now, wiping out that squad would have cost you at least half your men. I saved you those losses. That's not the attitude of someone here to pick a fight." The albino old wolf fell silent for a moment, then let out a muffled chuckle from his throat, a sound like stones rolling in an iron pot. "Interesting. You're a better speaker than your father. If he'd been as eloquent as you back then, your mother wouldn't have been targeted by the Black Moon Church so early on." His words were like a fine needle, piercing precisely into a spot on my chest that hadn't yet had time to scab over. I didn't avert my gaze from him. I simply wiped my blood-stained hand on my pant leg. You know about my mother, an old wolf who's lived 40 years on the northern frontier. How many don't know of Elena Moonshadow? He said. Back then, to prevent the Black Moon Church from obtaining the method to decipher the final page of the Forbidden Book, your mother ventured alone into the territory of my Iron Skull tribe and hid here for 9 full days. I wasn't the chieftain back then, just a hunter in the tribe. I saw her with my own eyes, sitting on a dead tree by the swamp, singing softly to the moon. Her voice was beautiful, as if it could soothe away the miasma and the spirits of the dead in the swamp. He paused, his pale red eye narrowing slightly, his tone taking on a weighty depth. Before she left, she said one thing to me. If one day a girl with the purple eyes of Shadowfang comes here, tell her not to fear taking the wrong path. Every step her mother took was paving the way for her. I didn't understand what she meant at the time, until tonight, when I saw you burst out of that mist. The wind swept through the marsh, briefly tearing a gap in the mist. Moonlight spilled across the muddy old riverbed, illuminating the corpses strewn about, and the blood-stain seeping into the earth. My eyes stung, but no tears fell. I walked up to the albino old wolf and held out my right hand, palm up, the gesture the northern wolves use, to signal a willingness to negotiate as equals. My father gave me 3 months to crush 3 rebellious tribes and stain my crown with their blood. But tonight I've changed my mind. I'm not here to crush the Iron Skull tribe. I'm here to ask you, are you willing to take a different path, to join me in uprooting the Black Moon cult, the shadowy force pulling the strings from behind the scenes? The white-haired old wolf looked down at my outstretched palm for a long time. Long enough for the wind to gather the mist once more, long enough for the Iron Skull warriors behind him to begin exchanging anxious glances. Then he slowly raised one massive forepaw and placed it gently on my palm. His paw was so heavy, it pressed my wrist slightly downward, but I held firm. My name is Harold. I am the chieftain of the Iron Skull tribe, 43 years old. I have fought in 123 battles, large and small, in my lifetime, and not a single one was fought for my own sake, he said. But this time, I am willing to make an exception, not for your father, not for your mother's dying wish, but for the decisiveness you showed tonight in choosing to kill first and negotiate later. He withdrew his claw and shook the mud from his mane. Speak, how do you plan to deal with that skeleton lurking behind the scenes? A long overdue campfire blazed in the Iron Skull tribe's encampment. The flames dispelled the mist at the edge of the swamp, illuminating gaunt faces that nonetheless bore a glimmer of hope. Harold told me he'd known all along that the Black Moon Church was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Morris had sent 2 groups of envoys deep into the swamp, promising that if the Iron Skull tribe continued to keep the northern royal family occupied, they would be granted vast tracts of the northern hunting grounds once the mission was accomplished. Harold cut off the heads of the first group of envoys and hung them on a dead tree at the swamp's entrance. The second group wisely retreated without daring to venture further in, but the Black Moon Church subsequently cut off all their external supplies, hoping to force them to submit through starvation. It's been 3 months, Harold said, sitting on a dry rock and picking bits of meat from between his teeth with a slender bone. My warriors' daily rations have been cut to half the normal amount. We've survived this long by hunting lizards and frogs in the swamp. Had you arrived just half a month later, the Iron Skull tribe would have collapsed on its own. I watched him calmly describe the famine plaguing his tribe, his tone as flat as if recounting an event that had nothing to do with him. Such a stoic, seasoned veteran is far more dangerous and far more admirable than those young chieftains who snarl and flail. The force I brought set up a temporary camp at the edge of the swamp. Balo's pack of wandering wolves and the Bloodclaw tribe's war wolves shared half of their rations with the Iron Skull warriors. As the young Iron Skull warriors accepted the food, some had tears welling in their eyes, but not a single one said thank you. They simply bowed their heads, eating in silence, gnawing the bones clean in silence, and burying the bone fragments in the earth in silence. Such is the dignity of the northern wolf clans. They would rather bury their gratitude in their hearts than speak it lightly. Cedric sat beside me and whispered, "You've already won over 2 tribes. Of the 3 rebel targets, you've resolved half in less than 2 weeks. This progress far exceeds my previous expectations. If you can manage to win over the Frostbone tribe, even if only with a promise of neutrality, when you return to the capital, you won't be leading a band of defeated soldiers, but a coalition strong enough to make Maurice reconsider his bargaining position." I nodded, but my thoughts drifted far away. News that Maurice's assassination squad had entered the marshes and been wiped out should reach the capital soon. Given Morris's caution and cunning, he would never sit idly by after learning of the failure of his first ambush. Instead, he would accelerate his deployments within the capital, which meant that the succession ceremony, scheduled for 3 months hence, might be brought forward. I must step through the capital's gates before Morris has secured his final line of defense. Harold stood up, walked over to me, and tossed something into my lap cold, heavy with the distinct feel of metal. I looked down to see a palm-sized silver token. Engraved on the front was a moon entwined with thorns, while the reverse bore a line of tiny ancient wolf clan script. By the light of the fire, I made out the words, "The moon's shadow never fades, the dark fangs endure forever." Harold's voice sounded like an ancient sigh in the night wind. "Your mother left this with me all those years ago. She said that if you ever came here, I should give this to you. She also said that this token can open a door deep within the underground altar of the Northern Kingdom's capital, a door behind which lies her final secret." I spent the entire night laying out this plan. The rain didn't let up. On the contrary, it grew heavier and heavier, turning into a downpour by the early hours of the morning. Water cascaded like a waterfall from the crumbling walls of the ruins, pooling into muddy streams in the low-lying areas. This rain was a blessing for me. It would mask the scent, muffle the sounds, and cover all traces of our movements. Barlow led a pack of 12 stray wolves, the best at burrowing, and under cover of the rain, crept to a collapsed semi-underground structure in the southeast corner of the ruins. It had once been a granary in the ancient city. After the earthquake, the ground had subsided nearly 2 meters, exposing the entrance to an old drainage pipe. The interior of the pipe was larger than I'd imagined, with a diameter wide enough for a full-grown werewolf to pass through while crouching. It took Barlow's men less than an hour to clear the silt and debris from the pipe. They then advanced nearly a mile along the pipeline system, mapping out the general layout of the first underground level. At 3 key junctions, they stacked bundles of hay soaked in pine resin and dry branches. A single spark would send thick smoke pouring through the passages into the main activity area on the 3rd underground level. Meanwhile, Black Blade led the pursuit squad to the northeast of the ruins, where they located the cave leading to the underground lake. The cave's entrance was obscured by dense vines and shrubs. It would have been impossible to discover without a deliberate search. Black Fang sent the smallest black wolf to crawl inside and scout. The report stated that the cavern was vast, with the surface of the underground lake as calm as a black mirror. The water stood about 3 or 4 meters below the ceiling, and there was ample space along both shores to hide at least 30 to 40 wolves. Everything was ready. I stood on a high earthen embankment outside the ruins. Rainwater trickled down my hair, soaking my collar, but my body was hot. The shadow power coursing through me raised my body temperature well above that of an ordinary wolf. The rain droplets even evaporated into a faint mist upon my skin. I stared in the direction of the ruins, waiting for the sky to shift from pitch black to deep blue, and then from deep blue to that grayish twilight before dawn. When the first streak of grayish, white light pierced through the clouds, I signaled to Ballo. Ballo personally lit the first bundle of resin, soaked dry grass. The flame struggled for a few seconds in the damp air, then surged upward, licking at the ancient brick walls of the tunnel. Thick black smoke billowed into the depths of the passageway, like a black viper, winding its way through the underground network. Immediately afterward, the second and third ignition points were lit. Thick smoke surged into the network of underground passages, from 3 directions simultaneously, rapidly spreading toward the various activity zones on the levels where the Frostbone tribe resided. The ruins fell silent for about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Then, I heard a commotion rising from beneath the ruins, first low, stifled gasps, then chaotic footsteps and coughing, followed by the chieftain's shouts echoing through the passageway as he tried to steady his panicking subordinates. The smoke proved even more effective than I'd anticipated. The fumes from the burning resin, soaked hay were thick, black, and choking. Once they filled the enclosed underground space, it was nearly impossible to hold one's breath long enough to survive. As I'd expected, the Frostbone tribe's wolves began pouring out of the ruins' main exits. They coughed and rubbed their eyes, stung to tears by the smoke. Many hadn't even had time to gather all their weapons, and some were still in their half-human, half-wolf shape-shifted forms, clearly choked awake by the thick smoke in their sleep and unable to complete their transformation in the rush. I stood motionless on the earthen embankment, simply watching them crawl out of every exit in utter disarray. I was waiting for the most crucial signal, Grey Falcon's report. Grey Falcon circled above the ruins, its piercing gaze cutting through the morning mist, locked onto the underground exit leading to the cavern. After about another incense stick's worth of time, Grey Falcon let out a long, shrill cry. That was the agreed-upon signal. The target had appeared. Raven Eye, the leader of the Frostbone tribe, had not chosen to escape through the main ground, level exit. Instead, she had led her elite force of over 30 trusted followers through an ancient drainage channel deep underground, known only to her, retreating toward the karst cave to the northeast. I turned, slid down the earthen slope, and was splattered with muddy water, but I had no time to wipe it off. I signaled to Cedric and Cole. No words were needed. They understood immediately. Raven Eye had fallen into the trap. I led my men around to the cliff face outside the cavern. From above, the entrance looked like a gaping black mouth, its edges overgrown with moss and ferns. I crouched at the edge of the cliff, pressing my body low as the power of shadow spread beneath my feet, silently enveloping a vast expanse of the rock face above the cave. Through the extension of this power, I could faintly sense the movements inside the cave, the ripples of water, the vibrations of footsteps, the rhythm of breathing, and the pace of heartbeats, all crystal clear. The underground lake within the cavern had risen significantly since Black Blade's reconnaissance. Replenished by rainwater, the elite warriors of the Frostbone tribe, emerging from the end of the drainage channel, waded through waist-deep water, attempting to cross the lake and climb out on the other side of the cavern. They were cautious, maintaining a well-organized formation. Scouts leading the way, the center providing cover, and the rear guard bringing up the rear. And even in retreat, they did not completely lose their composure. But Black Blade and his hunting party had already taken up ambush positions on the rock walls, flanking the cavern, like 9 black stone sculptures fused with the shadows, motionless. As for me, standing on the cliff's edge, I slowly raised my right hand. The black patterns on my palm coalesced into a swirling mass of shadow energy, compressing tighter and tighter until it finally formed a fist-sized sphere, radiating a deep purple glow. I aimed for the very center of the underground lake. The moment the shadow orb left my hand, it traced a purple-black arc through the air and struck the center of the lake with pinpoint accuracy. Boom! The shadow orb detonated the instant it hit the water, its energy exploding in all directions and sending waves several meters high crashing upward. The entire cavern rumbled with a deep, muffled roar under the shockwave, and rock debris rained down from the ceiling. The elite warriors of the Frostbone tribe, who were wading across the lake were knocked into the water by the shockwave. Some were slammed against the rock walls by the waves, while others sank straight to the bottom. The alpha wolf struggled to steady himself, choking on water as he shouted loudly to try to regroup his forces, but his voice caught in his throat mid-shout. Because he had seen me, I stood at the boundary of light and shadow at the cave's entrance, a gray-white curtain of rain forming behind me. The power of darkness flowed slowly around me, repelling the raindrops, which evaporated into white mist an inch from my skin. My pupils burned with a purple glow, and the black patterns on my arms had spread to my neck, as if some ancient totem were covering my entire body. Raven Eye, I don't want to kill you. I want to talk to you. My voice echoed through the cavern, drowning out the sound of the water and the gasps of breath. The elite warriors of the Frostbone tribe, struggling in the water, all looked up at me. Some reflexively gripped their weapons, but not a single one dared to strike first, for they could sense it. The overwhelming aura of shadow power, radiating from me, far surpassed that of an ordinary newly awakened Wolf Clan member. It was the instinctive suppression of a higher-tier bloodline over a lower one, like a rabbit facing a hawk, or a deer facing a tiger. Ancient memories deep within their bodies screamed at them, "Do not resist." A slow, rhythmic footsteps echoed from beneath the water. The water level had dropped slightly after the shadow orb exploded, and a figure slowly emerged from the murky lake onto the shore. It was a lean she-wolf, her soaked fur clinging to her body, revealing sleek, muscular lines. Her coat was a rare deep gray, nearly black, but behind her left ear was a striking white patch. One of her eyes was cloudy and white, a blind eye, while the other shone like a cold star in the night, so sharp it seemed capable of piercing a person's soul. Raven Eye, leader of the Frostbone clan. She walked slowly toward me, stopping 3 paces away. She did not kneel, did not expose the back of her neck, did not make any gesture of submission. She simply stood there, staring straight at me with that single eye. She was soaked through, droplets of water trickling down the tips of her fur. Her breathing was slightly faster than usual, a physiological reaction that hadn't fully subsided since she'd escaped the shadow explosion. But there was not a trace of panic or submission in her gaze. She spoke, her voice hoarse as if sandpapered. "Are you that worthless outcast driven out by the Grey Rock Pack?" As she spoke, there was no contempt or provocation in her tone. It was more like a statement of fact, as matter of fact as noting today's weather or the number of prey in the forest, a neutral observation devoid of emotion. "I am, but I wasn't driven out. There simply wasn't room for me there anymore." Raven Eye fell silent for a moment, then let out a low, hoarse chuckle. "Interesting. That guy Thor surrendered, and that old white-haired herald has sided with you too. I thought they'd at least hold out until my supplies ran dry, but it turns out they're both kneeling faster than I expected." They didn't kneel. They simply made a smarter choice. Between me and the Black Moon Church, they chose an ally who wouldn't stab them in the back. Raven Eye's ears twitched slightly. It was the first time tonight I'd seen even the slightest flicker of emotion on her otherwise impassive face. She remained silent for a long time, long enough for the water in the cavern to settle completely, long enough for the elite Frostbone warriors who'd crawled out of the water to rise one by one and gather silently behind her. She lowered her head, turning her blind eye toward me, then spoke softly, her words like a heavy stone cast into a calm lake, sending out ripples that spread in ever-widening circles. "Your mother said exactly the same thing back then." My heart skipped a beat. Crow's Eye raised her head, the light in her single eye growing incredibly complex. She said, "Do you think I chose these ruins as my base for no reason? Do you really think I care about this worthless pile of rocks where I can't even find prey? I chose this place because, deep beneath this ancient city, in the old altar, lies the second memory your mother left behind. She didn't just leave one with Audrich. She left a fragment of memory at 3 different locations in the north, entrusting each to the 3 people she trusted most, Audrich, Harold, and me. What was in the memory she entrusted to you? Raven Eye lowered her head and traced a symbol on the damp ground with her claw, the emblem of the Black Moon Church, an inverted crescent moon with 3 wavy horizontal lines beneath it. The memory she left mentioned a name. It wasn't the Shadow Lord, nor was it Maurice. It was someone even deeper than them both, closer to the core. She said that if one day she failed to stop that sacrifice, the one truly controlling the Black Moon Church wouldn't be the Shadow Lord or the priest, but someone she once trusted most. I clenched my fists. Who? Raven Eye looked up, his eyes shining with startling intensity in the dim cave. She didn't tell me the name. She only said that person has a silver diamond-shaped birthmark right in the center of their forehead. That is a mark that appears only on the heir with the purest bloodline within the Moon God Priest family, the mark of the Moon God. And your mother, herself, has an identical mark on her forehead. Raven Eye paused, his voice growing extremely soft. If the person controlling the Black Moon Church also bears the same seal of the Moon Goddess on their forehead, then that means the mastermind behind your mother's sacrifice was not an outsider. It was someone from her own bloodline. In that moment, I felt with crystal clarity that the entire narrative had suddenly flipped in my mind. Maurice was merely an executor. The Shadow Lord was merely a masked shadow. The person truly standing at the very depths of all this darkness was my mother's blood relative, someone bearing the Moon Goddess's mark, someone she once trusted most. And by leaving 3 fragments of memory to be entrusted to her 3 most trusted guardians, my mother was using her last ounce of strength to point the finger of blame at her own family. I looked down at the silver token in the palm of my hand. Thorns entwined around the moon on the token, glowing with a faint, cold light in the dim light. Mother, oh mother, is this last secret you left me a key to protect me, or a door opening onto a truth I'd rather not face? I stood at the entrance to the cave, rain pouring down from the canopy behind me, pooling at my feet into a trickle that flowed through cracks in the rock into the underground lake. The black patterns on my arms glowed faintly in the damp, chilly air. They wound quietly around my skin like vines, while my heart felt as though it were being squeezed by an invisible claw. Raven Eye's words were like an ancient key, inserted into the most secret lock in my heart. A blood relative bearing the Moon Goddess's mark on their forehead. This meant that the person who had plotted to sacrifice my mother was most likely a direct relative of hers, a sibling she had grown up with, or perhaps even her own mother or father, my maternal grandparents. I didn't press Crow-Eye for further details, for I knew full well that she had already revealed everything she could at this moment. As for the rest, only by returning to the royal city myself and opening that door, which required a silver token, could I uncover the final complete truth my mother had left behind. I held out my hand to Crow-Eye. She looked down at my hand, hesitated for a moment, then slowly extended her wet claw and pressed it gently against my palm. It was not an act of submission, but a confirmation of an equal alliance based on a shared goal. Your mother saved my life all those years ago, Crow-Eye said. I have guarded her memories for 18 years, and today I have handed them over to you in their entirety. I will not walk the path ahead for you, but I will not stand in your way either. The Frostbone tribe has been subdued. All 3 rebellious tribes have been pacified in less than 3 weeks. This progress is nearly 2 months ahead of my father's expectations and far ahead of my own. But I have no time to stop and celebrate. For every day I delay gives Maurice in the royal city 1 more day to fortify his defenses. I ordered Cole to remain in the ruins of the Frostbone tribe, with the young warriors of the Shadow Moon tribe, to assist Raven Eye in rebuilding the defenses, while simultaneously using the extensive network of underground passages beneath the ruins to establish a more covert intelligence line. Into the royal city, Barlow led the wandering wolf pack and a portion of the Bloodclaw tribe's war. Wolves back to the Iron Skull tribe to rendezvous with Harold, serving as reserve mobile forces. Black Blade and the hunting party served as my vanguard, setting out ahead of us to the outskirts of the royal city to gather intelligence on Morris's recent troop movements. Once everything was in order, Cedric and I, traveling light, set out from the Frostbone tribe on the final leg of our journey to the royal city of the north. The northern capital was built upon the ridges of a continuous range of black mountains. From afar, it resembled a colossal beast crouching on a cliff, its pitch-black walls blended seamlessly with the dark rock. With only the silver moon, patterned banners planted at intervals along the ramparts fluttering in the wind, proclaiming the city's allegiance to all who approached. I stood on a ridge 2 li from the city gates, gazing at the towering city from afar. An indescribable feeling welled up in my heart. This was the first time I had ever seen my true hometown. I was born here, yet I lived here for only 7 days before being sent away, spending 18 years on the distant, remote frontier, mocked as a useless waste of space. And after all these twists and turns, I have finally returned here. Cedric stood beside me, following my gaze toward the city, and whispered, "Your father probably doesn't know you've arrived yet. Whether he knows or not, I have no intention of walking through those city gates for the welcome ceremony he's arranged." Cedric paused, startled. "What do you plan to do?" I took out the silver token my mother had left me and twirled it between my fingers. The silver light reflected a sharp beam in the afterglow of the setting sun, piercing toward the top of the tallest tower in the royal city. It was the highest spire of the palace, its peak flying a Shadowfang fanner larger than any other. That was where my father was. "I'm going in from a place no one would expect," I said, clenching the silver token. "Through that door at the underground altar. The place where my mother was sacrificed should also be where I walk into the royal city with my head held high." Cedric's violet pupils contracted slightly. Then he nodded slowly. "That's exactly what someone of the Shadowfang lineage would do. The city gates are for guests. Heroes have always broken through the walls." I tucked away the silver token and turned to walk down the ridge. The power of the shadows beneath my feet spread silently outward, gently pushing aside the sand and stones on the ground, forming a circle of purplish-black ripples in the afterglow of the setting sun. I did not walk fast, but every step was steady, the true unwavering stride of an heir. 3 days later, on the night of the full moon, the succession ceremony that Morris had meticulously prepared for 18 years would begin in a way he could never have imagined in his wildest dreams. Raven Eye's words were like an ancient key, inserted into the most secret lock in my heart. A blood relative bearing the moon goddess's mark on their forehead. This meant that the person who had plotted to sacrifice my mother was very likely a direct relative of hers. A sibling she had grown up with, or perhaps even her own mother or father, my maternal grandparents. I didn't press Crow's Eye for further details, for I knew full well that she had already revealed everything she could at this moment. As for the rest, only by returning to the royal capital myself and opening that door, which required a silver token, could I uncover the final complete truth my mother had left behind. I held out my hand to Crow Eye. She looked down at my hand, hesitated for a moment, then slowly extended her damp claw and pressed it gently against my palm. It was not an act of submission, but a confirmation of an equal alliance based on a shared goal. "Your mother saved my life all those years ago," Crow's Eye said. "I have guarded her memories for 18 years, and today I have handed them over to you in their entirety. I will not walk the path ahead for you, but I will not stand in your way either." All 3 rebellious tribes have been pacified in less than 3 weeks. This progress is nearly 2 months ahead of my father's expectations and far ahead of my own. But I have no time to stop and celebrate, for every day I delay gives Maurice in the royal city 1 more day to fortify his defenses. I ordered Cole to remain in the ruins of the Frostbone tribe, with the young warriors of the Shadow Moon tribe, to assist Raven Eye in rebuilding their defenses, while simultaneously using the extensive underground tunnel system beneath the ruins to establish a more covert intelligence network into the royal city. Barlow led the Wandering Wolf Pack and a portion of the Bloodclaw tribe's wolves back to the Iron Skull tribe to rendezvous with Harold, serving as reserve mobile forces. Blackblade and the hunting party served as my vanguard, setting out ahead of us to the outskirts of the royal city to gather intelligence on Morris's recent troop movements. The northern capital was built upon the ridges of a continuous range of black mountains. From afar, it resembled a colossal beast crouching on a cliff, its pitch-black walls blended seamlessly with the dark rock, with only the silver moon, patterned banners planted at regular intervals along the ramparts fluttering in the wind, proclaiming the city's allegiance to all who approached. I stood on a ridge 2 li from the city gates, gazing at the towering city from afar. An indescribable feeling welled up in my heart. This was the first time I had ever seen my true hometown. I was born here, yet I lived here for only 7 days before being sent away, spending 18 years on the distant remote frontier, mocked as a good-for-nothing. And after all these twists and turns, I have finally returned here. I took out the silver token. My mother had left me and twirled it between my fingers. In the afterglow of the setting sun, the silver surface reflected a sharp beam of light that pierced toward the top of the tallest tower in the royal city. It was the highest spire of the palace, its summit flying a Shadowfang banner larger than any other. That was where my father was. I tucked the letter away, took a deep breath, and bent down to pick up the oil lamp from the stone platform. The moment I touched it, it lit itself. The wick flickered with a silvery, white flame illuminating the stone steps leading down into the depth. The stone steps were long and wound downward. The air grew colder, but the scent of blood grew stronger. With every step I took on the stone steps, it felt as though I were treading upon some ancient memory. When the steps finally came to an end, a massive iron gate appeared before me. Embedded in the gate with silver thread was a moon, entwined with thorns, exactly the same design as the one on my token. I could hear faint, low chanting coming from behind the gate, mixed with the clinking sound of chains dragging across the ground. I pressed both hands against the gate, and the power of the shadows surged from my palms. The gate let out a hoarse groan, and slowly swung inward. The altar beyond the gate was larger than I had imagined, circular, with a diameter of at least 20 or 30 meters. The floor was paved with black stone slabs, engraved with intricate runes that glowed a dusky red under an unknown light source. At the very center of the altar stood a black stone pillar, nearly 2 men tall, its surface entwined with silver chains. Surrounding the pillar stood 7 or 8 figures clad in black robes. They kept their heads bowed, their hands clasped before their chests, murmuring incantations. Directly in front of the altar, on a high platform built of white stone, stood a woman. She appeared to be in her 50s or 60s, her long silver, white hair neatly falling over her shoulders. The contours of her features bore a striking resemblance to the face of my mother as I remembered her, yet hers possessed an added edge of coldness and sharpness. In the center of her forehead, a silver diamond-shaped mark glowed brilliantly in the firelight. She slowly turned her head to look at me, standing at the entrance to the altar. As our eyes met, she smiled. A smile as elegant and composed as that of a host welcoming a distinguished guest. "You've come, my granddaughter." My voice was steadier than I'd expected. "You were the one who sacrificed my mother." "Sacrificed?" Her eyebrows arched slightly. "No, that wasn't a sacrifice. It was a return. The purest blood of the moon goddess flows through her veins. Her soul was meant to return to the moon goddess's embrace, to become part of the forbidden book, using her power to safeguard the balance of the entire north. Yet she chose your father, chose to be the mate of a mere mortal werewolf, and gave birth to a child who should never have been born. You, It was she who first betrayed the mission of her bloodline. My gaze passed over her and settled on the black stone pillar in the center, the book placed before it, its black cover edged with a faint silver sheen, flickering with a dim, flickering light in the gloom. It was the forbidden book bound layer upon layer by my father's shadow chains. You sacrificed your own daughter just to activate a book? I didn't sacrifice her. I saved her. Grandma's voice suddenly rose. Do you think your mother is dead? No, her soul lives on, right inside that book. She's trapped between its pages, neither living nor dead, never sleeping, never resting, enduring 18 years of solitude all alone. As long as someone who inherits the moon goddess's bloodline spills their blood onto the altar, the forbidden book will be fully unlocked, and her soul will finally gain true freedom. Her voice softened again, like a venomous snake flickering its tongue. And you, my dear granddaughter, half her blood flows through your veins. Your blood is the key. Your coming here tonight is no coincidence. It is fate's guidance. You too are searching for an answer, one that will allow you to let all of this go. And only I can give you that answer. Come now. If you are willing to let a single drop of blood fall upon the altar, your mother will gain eternal freedom. And you too can have everything you desire. I looked down at the palm of my hand, where the power of the shadows surged beneath my skin, roaring like a river trapped beneath the ice. Then I looked up at this blood relative standing before me, the one who had orchestrated it all. In that moment, I spoke a single sentence, my voice soft yet echoing through the empty altar. There was a line in the letter my mother left me. What Grandma does best is package pain as sacrifice. Her smile froze on her lips. I raised my hand to grasp the silver medallion around my neck, yanked it off with force, and held it before me as the power of the shadows surged from my palm into the medallion. The thorned moon on the medallion instantly exploded into a blinding white light, which spread outward at an unstoppable speed, colliding with the rune engraved walls surrounding the altar. The dark red runes carved into the stone slabs began to tremble violently the moment they touched the light, then shattered one after another with a crisp cracking sound. For the first time, my grandmother's expression changed. Have you lost your mind? Those are the altar's stabilizing runes. If you destroy them, the seal on the forbidden book will completely break loose. Every living being within the altar's range will be devoured by the power of the shadows. I know, I replied calmly, the power of the shadows surging unreservedly from within me. Black patterns crawled across my entire face, my eyes turning completely into a burning purple, and my voice, in that moment, carried a dual resonance, as if two people were speaking at once. One of them was my mother. What you failed to do 18 years ago, I will complete for her 18 years later. Light and shadow collided violently within the altar. The forbidden book trembled violently on the stone pillar, and the chains binding it began to crack. My grandmother staggered back 2 steps, her face flickering between light and shadow. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I lifted my foot and took a step forward. This step is for my mother. Another step. This step is for all the children who have lost their mothers over the past 18 years because of your ambition. I took another step, standing right in the center of the altar, before the black stone pillar that bound the forbidden book, and before the woman who had orchestrated all of this. The power of the shadows surged within me to an unprecedented peak. In that moment, I felt I was no longer merely a newly awakened heir, but a being born of the convergence of my mother's and father's wills. Your era has ended. A silvery white light burst forth from the token in my hand, transforming into a pillar of light that pierced the dome of the altar and shot straight into the night sky. The chains binding the forbidden book snapped one by one, and the cover opened of its own accord in the glow. The page that had been sealed for 18 years emitted a low sigh-like sound. A silvery, translucent figure rose slowly from the pages. Her face was identical to mine, her eyes glistening with tears. yet her lips curved into a smile. She looked down at me, her gaze brimming with relief and pride. My mother, after 18 years of imprisonment, was finally gazing upon her daughter once more. "You did it?" Her voice was as gentle as moonlight, cutting through all the clamor within the altar. "You've grown up. You're braver than I was, stronger than I was. Thank you, my daughter, now. Don't forget the third thing I left you. Don't look back." The moment her words fell, that silvery figure dissolved into countless flecks of light, like a reverse snowfall, drifting slowly into the night sky and merging with the starlight. At that very moment, the pages of the forbidden book closed of their own accord. The silver thorn, moon pattern on the cover slowly faded, eventually vanishing entirely, transforming the book into an ordinary old blank volume. I stood in the center of the altar. The shadow power in my palms gradually subsided, and the black pattern slowly faded, revealing the intact, healthy-looking skin beneath. I looked down at my hands. They were clean and clear, and even the black patterns that had once covered them had completely vanished. The silver medallion lay quietly in my palm, no longer glowing, like a piece of ordinary old metal. I looked up at my grandmother on the high platform. She was no longer smiling. For the first time, her wrinkled face bore an expression I could not quite decipher. Not anger, not fear, but a mixture of surprise, confusion, and a faint, almost imperceptible sense of relief. "You destroyed the forbidden book," she said hoarsely, as if she had aged 20 years in an instant. "You destroyed everything I spent half my life plotting." I looked into her eyes. There was no hatred, no anger. Number, I merely returned it to where it belongs. This book was written in my mother's blood, so tonight I will use my own blood to close it once and for all. I turned and walked toward the altar's exit. As I passed the black-robed cultists sprawled on the ground, I did not lower my gaze to look at them. The moment I reached the altar's exit, the night wind rushed in from outside, ruffling the ends of my hair. I heard an extremely faint murmur behind me, a voice almost swallowed by the wind. "Your mother used to like ending her sentences that way too." I did not look back. I stepped out of the altar and into the moonlit courtyard of the Northern Kingdom's capital. The night sky was studded with stars, and the brightest guiding star of the north hung directly above the spire of the capital's tallest tower. Beyond the courtyard, flames blazed brightly, and the sounds of frantic searching and cries of alarm rose in waves. They had discovered the disturbance near the altar and were organizing a search. I took a deep breath and set off toward the densest cluster of flames, passing through the moon gate and stepping into the bright glow. The silver-haired man leading the group stopped abruptly the moment he saw me. His deep purple eyes locked onto me across the courtyard. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He simply stood there watching me in silence. I walked toward him, my boots clacking crisply against the stone pavement. I stopped 3 paces away, looked up to meet his gaze, and spoke calmly and clearly. "Father, I'm back." The night wind swept up the fallen leaves scattered across the courtyard, creating a rustling sound. I held the silver token in the palm of my hand. It no longer glowed, yet it remained warm, like the lingering heat of a body that had just ended an embrace. The flames on the altar had already died out. The seal on the forbidden book was permanently broken, and my mother had finally gained true freedom. And for me, this was only the beginning.